we were looking for. Good evening, and welcome to the Council Advisory Committee CAC meeting of the 14th of November, 2023. The meeting is being live streamed on Town of Kentville YouTube channel. The most up-to-date meeting package is on the Town of Kentville website. Before the meeting begins this evening, the Chair wishes to apologize to Council for their unprofessional behavior at the October 30th meeting of Council. The Chair allowed their frustration with the proceedings to take over, for which I am truly sorry for my actions. This meeting is called to order. Have all of the councillors received and reviewed their meeting package? Does any member of council have information pertaining to a matter before this council which has not been publicly circulated? As the Council Advisory Committee, we will vote as a committee to either send business forward to the council meeting for ratification, return to staff for further information or review, or defeat the recommendation. I will remind members of council that we should continue to be mindful of our decision-making wheel to make balanced and respectful decisions while adhering to our code of conduct. This council, through policy and by motion, has adopted Robert's Rules as our rules of order, our parliamentary procedure, and as the chair of the meeting, it is the chair's responsibility to use those orders to ensure the business of the town is conducted. As per Robert's Rules, it should be noted that CAC meetings are transacted to carry out the business of council, the governance of the town of Kentville. The council will be voting electronically on all motions except administrative, which will be by show of hands. Are there any conflict of interest issues that council should be aware of before the meeting commences? The chair notes we have quorum. CAO, we have been provided with a proposed agenda. Are there any further additions or deletions to that agenda?
There are a few, thank you, Mayor Snow. Under 4B, we were supposed to have a presentation by Valley Community Learning Association. Unfortunately, that has been postponed. Under 5E, Engineering and Public Works, we have the Director's Report. I'd like to add item number 2, a recommendation for the joint foreman funding application. Force main, thank you. Takes a village. Under 8, for new business, 8B, we have municipal elections. And then 8BA, appointment of returning officer. I would like to add to that appointment of returning officer and assistant returning officer. Under 8C, we're going to switch that. That's voters list. And then we're going to add a D, so 8BD, advance poll date, October 10th, 2024. If anyone was able to follow that. So C is going to be voters list, and D will be advanced poll date, October 10th, 2024.
Thank you, CAO. If I could have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended, please. Councillor Huntley, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor York, thank you. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. The Council Advisory Committee meetings of October the 10th, 2023 have been distributed for approval. If there are no changes, the minutes are approved as distributed. If there are changes, the recording secretary will annotate the minutes in red, and the annotated minutes will be added to the electronic meeting file as approved. Are there any changes? Councillor Zabian.
Thank you, Mayor Snow. I guess I forgot there. You didn't ask if there were any additions or deletions from council. You skipped that part and went right on to accepting the agenda.
Okay, the agenda's been accepted.
Well, I have an addition. I'd like
Councillor,
to add.
the agenda's been accepted.
I know,
Thank
but you didn't ask the question.
Councillor, the agenda has been accepted by motion of council.
But you didn't ask the question.
Councillor,
Mayor Snow.
you had time to put on your
Well,
light.
I waited for you to talk, because if I talk when you don't let me, you get angry with me, and I don't want to have an argument with you, so I waited for the question.
Okay, Councillor, you're now arguing with council. Council has an approved agenda, and we'll go forward with that. Thank you.
So I can't add something to the agenda.
I'm looking for approval of the minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes? No? Thank you. We have one presentation. It's with regards to the basic income guarantee, and the floor is now open to you, Becca.
We're going to provide the long and the short of basic income guarantee.
I have the long, right?
She has the long, I have the short.
Perfect. Thank you so much for allowing us to present with you this evening. My name is Becca Green-LaPierre. I come to you on behalf of the Kings County Community Food Council. A few years back, public health and community health boards identified food security as a problem in our area. And as one of the ways to address this issue, Food Council was formed. And as you can appreciate, without adequate income, you probably don't have adequate access to food. So we see addressing food insecurity, requiring upstream policy solutions that guarantee a stable, adequate income for all. So that's our connection to basic income. And I'm joined here tonight with my colleague Roger Tatlock from Basic Income Nova Scotia. And I think that Big NS is an appropriate group for you to belong to. Our Food Council is collaborating with Big NS as we reach municipalities across the valley so that our municipal councils can have a loud collective voice on this topic as they reach out to Halifax and Ottawa on something that we think is incredibly important. We do have two asks for council tonight. And Roger and I feel so strongly that especially during this time, as you folks are dealing with all the uncertainties of the provincial pallet housing possibility, that we keep our eye on long-term, permanent solutions to poverty and homelessness. And we think a basic income guarantee is one of those long-term, permanent solutions to poverty and homelessness. So don't worry, we're gonna come back to this slide. First, Roger and I want to make sure that we're all talking the same language, that we're all on the same page about what is a basic income guarantee. In your counselor packages, you would have received a document. Looks a little like this. It's called The Case for Basic Income in Municipalities. And in the first paragraph of this document, it's going to read this definition. Basic income is an income-tested, targeted, unconditional cash transfer from governments to individuals that enable everyone in Canada to meet their basic needs, participate in society, and live in dignity, regardless of their work status. A basic income guarantee would be a massively impactful upstream social policy investment. It would be a major structural change in how we deal with poverty, and it would be a major philosophical shift in how we view poverty, such as how we value our neighbor. A neighbor who could be unemployed because perhaps they're taking care of an elderly parent. A neighbor who could be unemployed because maybe there was some structural changes and they lost their job. A neighbor who could be unemployed because AI, artificial intelligence, made their job obsolete. There's a lot of reasons why people may be unemployed or not working and may be in need of a basic income guarantee. So a basic income guarantee could help any and all Canadians maintain an income floor. So the great news is that there's a lot of researchers and advocates talking about this, working on this across our country. And that document that I was talking about, The Case for Basic Income in Municipalities, it was written by the Canada Coalition for Basic Income, and they're a coast-to-coast organization with representatives, Basic Income Nova Scotia being one of them. And they helped create this common definition of what is a basic income. And they also helped set principles that would guide the implementation of a basic income. So it's really wonderful having, being a part of a larger group that's working all across the country with a same definition, same voice, same understanding, same guiding principles. Another document in your package was Canada Coalition's submission to the Standing Committee on National Finance in support of a bill in the Senate on the same topic of implementing a basic income guarantee. And in that document, it spells out those guiding principles. I've got some of them on the screen here, but that document will detail them much more eloquently than I can give you or I have time to give you tonight as well. I'll pass it on to Roger.
So some say that Canada already has basic income programs, but they're targeted basic income programs. We're all familiar with the Canada Child Benefit for Families, Old Age Security, the Canada Worker Benefit, and the Canada Disability Benefit that both came in this summer. These are federal programs. Some of you may be familiar with two targeted basic income guarantee programs that happen in Atlantic Canada. One is in PEI, started in 21. It's for people on social assistance between the ages of 18 and 65 that are living independently. And that program gives enough money that the person can live at 85% of the market basket measure of poverty. Just last week, if you watched the news, on November 8th, Newfoundland announced that they're going to do a targeted basic income guarantee for people between the ages of 60 and 64 that are on income assistance. They're basically going to start them on OAS GIS at the age of 60. So then we have two questions. If you're going to look at basic income guarantee, isn't it time for a basic income guarantee for everyone? Isn't it time to stop picking and choosing who is deserving in our society? And secondly, isn't it time that the basic income guarantee is a livable amount of money? Want to flip them? Thank you. So you might be thinking, because I've been at municipal unit discussions before, this is totally out of our jurisdiction. We don't need to get involved in this. But poverty impacts our communities, and the costs of poverty are downloaded onto municipalities all the time. We believe that municipalities represent an important voice in social policy discussions at all levels. They are often on the front lines, working to ensure that residents and communities lead happy, healthy, sustainable, and productive lives. That's why we think it is appropriate to ask you to get involved in the basic income guarantee discussion by supporting our request. So the case for basic income and municipalities that you've had a chance to look at briefly outlines some benefits we could expect to see in Kentville if all residents have adequate income to meet their needs. It is appropriate for you to ask me why I think these effects will occur with the implementation of a basic income guarantee. My response is that you will not really know until a big is done. I understand that. But we're learning from experiments and time-limited trials that are happening all over the world. And this list of outcomes are some of the highlights. If benefits like this were not happening in experiments and trials all over the world, there would not be 40 different basic income guarantee programs in the state of California alone. Newfoundland would not be implementing a basic income. And PEI would not be repeatedly offering to our federal government to be the first large-scale trial of a basic income guarantee in Canada.
So I want to share a quote that the mayor, Mike Savage, mayor of HRM, clearly stated. This is last year at the 2002 Atlantic Canada Basic Income Summit. And I believe he also gave this quote last week at your NSFM. The feds have the money, the province has the jurisdiction, but the city, insert Kentville, insert any municipality, has the problems. The case for basic income in municipalities that you have in your councillor package was co-authored by Mayor Mike Savage. It does briefly outline, expanding on some of those things Roger touched on last slide, what we could expect if Kentville, where all of our residents had adequate income to meet their health, their housing, their food needs. We've also included in your councillor package some relevant stats to income and health that's relevant to Western Zone Nova Scotia. And the neat thing is you'd be in really good company if you guys chose to support basic income. To date, 9 municipalities across the province have already passed resolutions in support of a basic income. And we'll get to that slide with the 2 asks in just a second. Not just municipalities, but there's across the country, there's been Chamber of Commerce, thank you for that. Takes a village, right? The Atlantic Mayors Congress has passed a motion this summer in support of it. And if you were to do the math, which Roger has, looking at those 9 municipalities, almost 65% of Nova Scotians are represented by their municipal governments that show a support of basic income. So you really would be in good company. And just to maybe put a bit of a competitiveness, like Wolfville's already passed a resolution, Annapolis County has already passed a resolution, so you know, something to think about. I'll let Roger say our 2 asks again.
So our asks to council, that the mayor write letters to the Prime Minister and Premier asking for federal and provincial territorial governments to work together to create a national livable basic income guarantee. That the mayor write a letter to the Premier and all MLAs with copies to the Prime Minister and Nova Scotia MPs requesting that the province establish an all-party committee of the legislature to research and design the implementation of a livable basic income guarantee for all Nova Scotians. So we're asking you to get involved. We're asking you to take a stand, to make a stand, along with many of your peers on a very important issue at this point in time. Thank you, guys. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your consideration of this important issue.
Thank you very much for that presentation. And Becca, before I go on, I just want to let you know how important your attendance was at NSFM last week for the roundtables. People were very impressed with what is going on here in Kentville with regards to the food security. So thank you for bringing that to a wider audience. Again, you guys are leading the way, bringing something to a wider audience. Thank you. I didn't have all 9 of those municipalities written down, but some of them must be just hopping on board. So right now, we will open the floor to questions from councillors. You are on our agenda as we move on. It will be business arising. So it will be after our staff reports. However, I expect that we will have a good discussion. The other thing as well is that all letters are approved by council, not just at the mayor's desk. And I have put down at that part, I guess, is to follow suit with what other municipalities have done in our region, particularly after the ask from the Atlantic Mayors Congress. Thank you. So I'll open the floor now. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I agree in principle with the basic income guarantee, but I do have some questions just because I don't know very much about it other than what you've said here. I'm wondering, first off, is there someplace in another country that has done this and has been doing it for any length of time?
An entire country?
Yeah.
That's a really good question.
Because we're kind of asking our federal government to do it for all of Canada. So I'm
Yes.
just wondering if there is a country.
There is not an entire country. Some people say that Iceland does, but when you look at it, it's not complete.
Okay.
But I do know that South Africa has legislation in front of it now, and I know that Barbados has legislation and is looking at it now.
Okay.
The neat thing about being in Canada at this point in time, we can look at OAS and GIS, which is basically a basic income guarantee
Yeah.
for seniors, and draw analogies.
Yeah.
We can look at the basic income for children and draw analogies and extrapolate for there. But in terms of an entire country, I'd have to do a little bit more homework on what happens in Iceland. People roll their eyes and sort of look at me when they talk about Iceland. But I do know there is legislation in South Africa and there is legislation in Barbados at this point.
Right, so then my other question would be, well, I have 2 other ones. How do we see that being funded? Like, who would fund this? Like, the government has the money, well, the government has only a certain amount of money
The government has a lot of money.
from
After
taxes.
Heather Roger here, he gets
So-
really excited about
I
it.
do, I get excited about this because
Okay.
I like the fact that the Parliamentary Budget Office, you guys are familiar with the Parliamentary Budget Office and what it does. It's basically the management accountants for our federal government. It does all the modeling, all the work, figuring out what things cost. Parliamentary Budget Office has been asked to look at this 3 times in 6 years. In 2021, they came back and said, if you do a basic income, it will cost $100 billion in the 25-26 fiscal year. Now, the thing about parliamentary budget is they can't tell you how to raise the funds. So they put that out and they talk about it. And there's been a lot of researchers looking at how to raise those funds. Half of the funds of that $100 billion, they believe, will be gotten from programs that currently exist. For example, if there was a basic income guarantee all over Canada, income assistance, those costs would be rolled into
Right.
what that costs. Would there still be a GST rebate?
Mhm.
Those costs probably be rolled in. So they're looking at $50 billion. That's what people think it would cost.
Okay.
$50 billion, to me, is a great deal of money. But during the banking crisis, they gave the banks $114 billion. Last year, they gave the oil and gas industry $100 billion. So you gotta keep context on the thing. There's a lot of people that are modeling how to pay for it. If you were to ask me, Roger, where's the money in Canada? Everybody in this room could say, the banks got money, the major corporations have money, And there are a lot of really rich people in the world. David Thompson, Reuters Thompson, is worth $46 billion. So there are people modeling how you would do tax reform in order to look at banking, in order to look at corporations, in order to look at the wealthiest among us. As simple as, for example, banks don't pay GST. In the province of Quebec they do, but no other province does banks pay GST. So there's ways to raise money. And that 50 billion sounds really scary, but contextually, I think it is something that can be done.
Okay, my last question is, if we raise and we give everybody basic income, and I'm not really great at economics, but we give everybody a basic income, then what stops goods and services from going up and gobbling up that extra money? Like, you know, that's kind of, it doesn't really, like I'm seeing, you know, stores and things like that just saying, okay, well, we can raise this up because now people have the money to pay for it. And so how does that level a playing field or anything if goods and service providers just up their?
Can I do that? Or do you?
Sure.
That is a really good question. When you look at OAS didn't generate inflation. When they brought in child benefits, it didn't generate inflation. But I personally would agree with you that that's a problem. That's why the motion is for the province to look at it, to study it. I believe that there are going to be, have to be put in some safeguards. For example, around housing. You know, if you give people money now, will it creep up next year, the year after, 5 years from now? So the idea of studying is what's happening in front of the Senate as well. Bill S-233 is to develop a framework for a national basic income guarantee. There are some sectors that we would have to go in and say, okay, we're gonna deal with housing straight out and pass legislation so that that type of thing does not occur. And that's why, you know, our recommendation is to ask our province to sit down and have a serious conversation about basic income guarantee. And you would be one of the first people to send that question in, and I would agree with it.
Yeah.
So there may need to be changes in legislation around housing, around food security, and other types of securities. Otherwise, you run the risk of just creating the situation we're in now, only delaying it
Yeah,
X
exactly.
number of years.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much.
No, that's good, that's good.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Becca, and thank you, Roger. Councillor Maxwell pretty much asked all the questions that I was going to ask. But one of the questions that I did have, well, obviously one of them is roughly what would it cost, but what does that income look like for individuals? Like how much roughly does that equate to?
Can I have a turn?
You can have a turn. You can have a turn.
So in Ontario, in 2017, 2018, they did do a basic income pilot. Folks got around 1,600, is that right? About 1,600 a month.
Okay.
If we look at CERB, where folks got 2,000 a month.
Right.
We are guessing it'll be something like that, but it's really premature to give a number. So when the PBO and the Parliamentary Budget Office costed out, everything is rising, right? So we are guessing it might be somewhere in that range.
Okay.
But it would be difficult to say an exact number. But based on pilots in the past and what we've seen during the pandemic, it seems like the federal government thinks that that's an appropriate amount.
Yeah. When Kathleen Wynne did the study in Ontario that Doug Ford killed, she started at $1,400. When Justin gave us money during CERB, he gave us $2,000. When the Parliamentary Budget Office figured out it was around $100 billion, it was based on around $1,600. So, and Dolly gave people in her home community when they had the fire, $1,500,
yeah.
And The Rock and Oprah gave the Hawaiians $1,600. So there's somewhere in the low 20s. It looks like it's $23,000, $24,000 a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just one other question. So how many municipalities, provinces, obviously you want everybody to make these recommendations, but what percentage would you like to see?
In Nova Scotia, we think
To make an
because-
impact?
All of them. We think this is relevant to every single Nova Scotian, so we
Okay.
would like to see a unified voice. That way Halifax hears it loud and clear, that way Ottawa hears it loud and clear. Yeah.
We're currently at a solid 65%,
Okay.
and we're not giving up. I think it's really important to be loud when you holler up. When you holler up to the guys on top, I think you have to be really, really loud. At 65%, you know, we're just over the moon in less than a year at getting 65%. But I agree with Becca. We need to be really, really loud. Because there's one thing that I'm hearing about our provincial government is they respond to polls. They respond to public opinion. We have to be really loud.
And I think because the research just really shows that this is a viable option. There's been great research that shows that, you know, folks that get this money, they don't spend it on what quote unquote temptation spending, we might call that alcohol or whatever. That the research doesn't show that. It shows that local stores are better supported, people have better income security, maybe they're purchasing a vehicle so they can access a job that they may not have had an opportunity towards. So we know that the research shows this is a good idea. We need the political will. We need our decision makers to be bold. And as Roger said, polls will hopefully help move that political will to be in line with the research.
A recent study showed that everyone that got a trial of basic income went from homelessness to being housed. I mean, results like that just have to get you excited about this may be a modern solution for modern problems. Right?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've been reading up on universal basic income for a few years. I don't agree with it, but I want to clarify the stuff I've been reading is from the World Economic Forum. Same thing. You're okay. The facts and figures that I found, and I would welcome you to email me where you're getting your facts and figures from. Like I said, I've not delved as deep into it, obviously, as you folks have. But the last number that I got was $918 billion a year. And when you look at a figure like that, the current government's already expanded the money supply by 32%, which has caused the worst inflation we've had in 40 years. My concern would be the longevity and sustainability of a plan like this, so that it worked without driving the cost. So as we all in this room know, the provincial government has done certain things that have now driven the cost of housing up. Where most people, even some people that own a house, if the house is paid for, they wouldn't be able to afford rent at what certain landlords are asking. So I won't be supporting this tonight, but like I said, I would welcome any information you could give me on top of this.
That's great. The thing that I would encourage you to look at, and we'll certainly send it, I have faith in the Parliamentary Budget Office. They are our people. They're telling us what it would cost. And I agree with you. When I first started looking at this issue, the idea of a universal basic income sort of made sense to me. So that would mean like Galen Wester would get a check. You know, that Dave Thompson would get a check. But the more research I did, the more I realized that's not the Canadian way. Giving everybody money is not the Canadian way. Helping people is the Canadian way. So that's why it would be means tested. That's why it would be means tested. I mean, you know, they brought in the Canada Worker Benefit this summer. If you're a single person making less than $33,000, the federal government's still gonna give you money. They're gonna give you $1,500 a year because they don't think you're making enough money. So I would caution you to look at, is it a universal basic income that they're talking about when the World Forum looks at it, or is it a means-tested basic income guarantee? And we can provide you the links to the Parliamentary Budget Office for sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Good.
Councillor York.
Thank you. Anecdotally, I've seen the impact of the rising costs in food and housing in our school food program, and just those numbers increasing week over week at this point. So I see firsthand, and I don't think you have to look that hard to see firsthand, the changing landscape of our communities. We already know that a living wage in the Annapolis Valley is around $25. I think it's like $24.50. It's right around $25. People are not making enough money to be able to live in Nova Scotia anymore. These programs have wildly successful stories that come out of them. I first heard about it sort of in like a contemporary context with Mayor Tubbs out of Stockton, California, and they were given in their municipality about $500 a month. So in comparison, less than what is being proposed, I think, across the country. But people are not spending that money on frivolities or luxuries. It's being spent on repaying debt. It's being spent on school. It's being paid to take a day off of a job that's not appropriate or not where you could be earning. Being able to afford to take a day off work so you can go and get more meaningful employment. This money, I think, I know right now it's kind of an idea that we're talking about, but this type of program has my full support, and I recognize that many people in this room have called me a snowflake before, and it's because of my beliefs on things like this. But I think there's only good things that happen when we raise those tides for all those boats. So I'm fully in support of programs like this across our country, and specifically across Nova Scotia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions for our presenters? Becca, Roger, thank you so very much. I invite you to hang out until we have further discussion and a vote on your request.
Thank you.
Thank you. The directors have provided the reports to council for review and will provide an update and receive questions from council. The reports will be presented and are part of the record of the meeting. The only items of new business arising from the reports will be taken for motion. And CAO Bedingfield, if you could introduce our department reports, please.
Thank you, Mayor Snow. I'm happy to say that we have a number of our amazing staff here tonight, and we're going to start with Director Matthews, Finance, and Director Matthews has 3 reports that she will be presenting.
Okay. Thank you. You may have noticed that my report said for the month of September. It is for the month of October. My apologies. I will highlight a few items in that initial report. You will have seen that the Department of Municipal Affairs and Housing are seeking feedback on our financial accounting and reporting manual. And we are unsure what that might look like, but we'll brief you once we have more information. From a financial perspective, I will talk to the statement of operations on our capital investment plan. But first, I wanted to mention that our temporary borrowing resolutions that were approved and submitted in September are still awaiting approval. From a tax levy perspective, you can see that our levy billed was $12,188,511 this year. Only 3.9% remains outstanding. And those numbers are provided to you for the current year and prior years. I will note that as at the date of this receivable listing, we hadn't sent out statements because it would have been the end of October. That would be when we would send statements to folks to remind them they haven't paid their bill. So that I thought would be meaningful in looking at those numbers. I'd like to move into Appendix A, which is the statement of operations. I will not spend a huge amount of time talking about that because we do have a forecast that also includes actuals, but I will highlight a few items. Overall, our year-to-date expenditures are 47.9% of our budget, and our revenue is 83.9%. And as I said, we've given our final tax levy, which makes up a significant portion of our revenue. We do have a surplus right now of just over $5.7 million. To get us through the last, this is for September's report for the last half of the year. I will note that our payments in lieu of taxes, those amounts are yet to be confirmed. They generally come in March, and we are not aware until the check comes in what those values might be. So there is some uncertainty in that final number. From an expense perspective, I had noted up to this point that our insurance fees were all under general admin, driving up those costs. Those have now been allocated across programs, so you'll see a better budget to actual correlation. I also would note that our public health and housing, you'll see we had a deficit higher than what we accrued last year, so we're about $7,600 more than what we anticipated. That expense will be in this year, and you'll see that as an over expenditure as we look at expenses through, as the year progresses. I also wanted to note, because we talked about the Canada Cup and saying that we were overspent, but now with the Canada Cup and pool revenues,
coming in higher than expected. We have positive variances in those programs within recreation. So those are the major changes to the operating statement for year-to-date October. Would you like me to keep going through the reports or take questions on them as individually?
Council? Do you want to keep going or
I can.
ask questions now?
I think I should ask questions now, because there's
Okay.
3 different reports.
There is.
and
Sure.
I have to be running back to-
Yep.
Sure.
No problem. All right, Councillor Maxwell, you're first up.
Okay, thank you. I'm just wondering, under your operations there on the third bullet down, it talks about your, says opportunities to optimize processes and enhance online access are an area of focus. I'm wondering what you really mean by optimized processes.
Sure.
I do understand what it means to,
Yeah.
up the online methods, but.
Right. So we are looking at, because we have a new director of finance and a new accountant, we have our payroll analyst who's recently left, so there's an opportunity to look at how we do things, the levels of controls that we have in place, do they need to be enhanced and therefore change a process, or are we overcompensating in some areas? So we're doing that review as we see things coming through our desk and saying, why do we do that? Does it make sense? How do we make a change to make it as efficient as possible, but still have the right level of controls around it?
Okay, great.
That's what I was meaning, if that helps.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
And when we go and we enhance the online and so on, we're still going to have that those old methods available for people who are not,
Yes.
computer literate and so
Absolutely.
on? Yeah, okay.
Yep.
And I have one more. Under the Department of Municipal Affairs and Housing, you talked about the reporting manual. They wanted us to, they want to look at our manual or something. Is that just us, or is
No.
that
So there's-
every municipality?
Yeah, there's provincial guidelines for how we are to account for things as a municipality.
Right.
And for those of you who recall, when we looked at year end, we had to incorporate the asset retirement obligation, which is a new accounting policy. So it's incorporating some of those changes into our manual and making other changes. And so there's an opportunity for municipalities to give feedback to the department before they issue a final release.
Okay.
So
great.
it may change some accounting methods, but for the most part, it's for changes in major policies that you're probably already aware of.
Right, and that's not just us, that's every
That's
municipality.
the whole province.
Yeah, okay,
That's right.
great,
We just have an opportunity to give some feedback.
perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Councillor Maxwell, we've heard it in this room called the FRAM,
Yes.
and so it would be their MGA.
Right.
FRAM, Financial
Reporting and accounting manual, yes. Okay.
Councillor Zabian.
Thanks, Director. Just a question in one of your notes here, and I hope I'm not jumping around. You noted here that our legal fees were approaching budget for the year.
That is in a different report, so we can chat, that's in
Okay,
forecast.
I'll wait till you go through that.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Director Matthews, and you made a comment about it, the tax levy bill in 2023, 2024. So that I'll call it 476,000 that's
Yes.
outstanding. I'm assuming that outstanding tax receivable is lower now, or it's still right around the same?
As of, I don't have a number as of today. That's as of November 1st.
That's as of November
November
1st.
1st.
Okay.
And that's why I was saying the first reminder notice hadn't gone out. Those reminder notices would have just gone out within the last week.
Okay.
And where I sit, I hear people coming in, and lots of folks are coming in saying,
Okay.
yeah.
So there's no real concern
No
there?
real concerns at
Okay.
all. But it's something that I will report again within the next few months
Yes.
as people have the opportunity to make those payments.
Right, and thank you, and I had a question around the FRAM manual as well,
Yes, answered.
that's been asked by Councillor Maxwell, so, thank you.
All right, moving on to your forecast report, please.
Sure. I have included capital investment forecast as well, which was Appendix B. I just wanted to note in the capital forecast, Last month, we were under $1 million. This month, we are up to $1.9 million in spend, and many more invoices being processed now. So a lot of the work that needed to happen seasonally has been happening, and I can provide an update to that next month, once again, as we get our October and November invoices processed. From an operating forecast perspective, I have provided an analysis along with a revenue sheet and an expenditure sheet. And I did want to just highlight the fact that, as I mentioned, there are leadership changes that have happened. So things are shifting within the finance department. And it is impacting you in terms of the kind of reporting that you're receiving. Certainly, from a leadership change, we are the lead on the budget reporting and accounting. We are assessing those outputs and deliverables and trying to really strike a balance between not providing too much data that can be overwhelming or kind of meaningless because you're trying to see the forest through the trees, and not providing so little information that it's not enough to support decisions. So you will see new reports tonight, and as we move forward, my goal is to really highlight not only the numbers, but the context and the lived experience we have as leadership that might influence the financial results of the town, so that you're aware of those things that we're trying to consider as we move this agenda forward. So you'll see in my report, it's more narrative, less numbers, but just trying to give you that context of where we are right now. So in the narrative, overall, we provided a detailed line by line on revenue of where we are. You'll see that in looking at revenue, we're anticipating at this point in time being pretty close to on budget on a $16 million forecast against a 15.96, so around under $43,000 variance. Many of our revenue items, as noted in the narrative, have already been received, so we have a sense of just where they're landing. So that detailed analysis and projection is shown there. The important point I felt that you needed to know is on the assessable property. It does show that we are forecasting just under what we had budgeted, and certainly there would have been appeals throughout the year, and there were some fires and some different changes to people's tax base that wouldn't have been in our assessment at December of last year, because our budgets are based on the assessments at December of 2022. So those changes are incorporated in there, and that is the actual and our best guess of what we expect to come in that area. All other items I mentioned when we talked finances, the statement of operations. We don't know our payment in lieu of taxes, so we're assuming that those will come in on budget. As we know more, we'll certainly provide those updates as we move forward. Excuse me. So that detailed work for revenue happened in September, and we are working, collaborating with each of the individual directors to kind of fully understand where they are and to be able to provide detailed variations where we anticipate them. If you look at the financial for expenditures, we are forecasting to match budget overall, and I haven't provided variations for individual programs because we're still working through that with the individual directors. What I have highlighted for you are areas that we think we need to watch and be careful of. The people side for us is very significant. We've had a lot of turnover within programs and services. We have vacancies that were filled at different times than we anticipated. We also have seen our recruitment costs, our onboarding, overtime for those shifts we need to fill, contracted services, all those pieces kind of coming into play because we don't have the staff that were embedded within our budget, or we didn't get them to come in at the time that we had anticipated. It's also taken a fair bit of leadership's time to do that recruitment. So I've noted that, which may drive some changes in the programs as the year progresses. And we also do anticipate, though, that some of those will have savings, some of them will have over expenditures, but that they should net out by the end of the year. I also noted a couple of other points that are accounting issues that weren't known at the date of budget, which would be around all of the impacts of our collective agreement over our cost of living adjustment, as well as, if folks recall, we recorded our vacation banks last year for those vacation hours that were accrued at the end of March. So if any of those balances are there next year and salaries went up for cost of living, so will that bank, and that'll be an expense that I'll have to cover. And that is not a large amount of money, but will be a cost. In the goods and services side, very generally, lots of inflationary pressures that continue to address or challenge our budgets. We also know that legal fees, I've noted they're starting to approach the annual budget, and we're halfway through the year, and we need to do a deeper dive around whether or not that will continue to rise, and that's the work we're doing as a leadership team. I also know that there were studies included in the budget that council had approved. And I noted secondary planning, but there are other work that we planned on doing that with vacant positions. We know that that is impacting the speed in which we get that work done. So those are the main contextual challenges that we're facing that I thought was important for council to be aware of. And as we move throughout the year, gather more actual information based on results further down the line, you'll start to see variations to that budget on a line-by-line basis as they arise. So that is my summary of the operating forecast.
All right, thank you very much for that, Director, and Councillor Xavier.
Thanks, Director. Thanks for your report. I love numbers. I'm just a number person. So where are our legal fees right now to date as of October 31st? Where are we at?
I do not have that number rate at my fingertips, I don't think, but I will. It is, I'm not sure the number, but we are like 90% of budget. It's
Okay.
somewhere in the high, very close to budget.
And the budget, I forget what the number was 300,000 or two, was it?
I think it was
Two
under
something?
that, probably, it was
In the
under 2.
twos.
It was under 2.
two?
If I
Yeah.
recall, it was under 2.
I guess
But I can
my,
provide clarity next.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I guess my concern is, and I'm only speaking for myself because I don't know who knows what or who doesn't know, but I know very little about any of these legal fees, and I just want to go on the record for that. I have to read them in media. And I'm not expecting to get that information from you at all. You're just a number person, so I appreciate that. But over the last 3 years, I hear about these things from the newspapers or the TV, and it's concerning because some of these matters can have severe implications on our finances. As you just said, we're at budget after half a year. I've come in here many times in the last 3 years and asked for what these cases are. Citizens come to me and tell me that they're embedded in a lawsuit, or I read it online. And I don't understand why there's so much secrecy within this organization that we as a council are not privy to this information. And we're not. I don't think any of us are. I know I'm not. I know not very little.
So if I may, through the chair, Councillor Zabian, we have an in-camera discussion
Mhm.
around legal, and it will touch on this.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. Director Matthews, you talked a little bit about the vacation banks that were recorded in 2023. So just to sort of remind me, that was the piece that Andy had mentioned in his management letter for the 2022-2023 year.
Correct.
And so when we talk about not a large amount of money in the ensuing year, we would have no idea what that would look like at this juncture.
I have an idea. So if you recall, in the management letter, what was discussed was the fact that we had banked vacation time at the end of the year, management reviewed policy, and looked at that and said, that means we have a liability we should set up. And in the letter, they suggested we look at other policies to that effect. So when we accrued that vacation, it was around 112.5, if I recall correctly. And that if those banks do not change and we have to apply a cost of living to it, it's about $5,000.
Okay.
It will only vary from that if people use that vacation bank, which we are encouraging them to use their time.
Right.
Or if time gets accumulated, but we are, you know, as a leadership team, trying to manage that. We do have some vacancies, so that's kind of the piece that I felt it was important to mention, because if you have folks vacant positions and someone can't get their vacation, it may increase that bank a bit.
Okay.
And we did not factor that into the 23-24 budget. We will need to factor that into 24-25 budget, which will come before council within the next 6 months, presumably, so,
Okay.
Great, thank you.
great.
Are there any further questions with regards to this report? Director, I just have a couple comments. With regards to the report, I truly appreciate that we're seeing what our budget looks like, where we are, and where we would be if we kept on the same path. So on the assessable property taxes, typically, we take our uniform assessment that the government's, or that PVSC sends us, and based on that, we know how much we should make in taxes. And then every time we give somebody a break on their taxes, is that where we're seeing this variance?
No.
Okay,
So, if we are required, if we give someone a break on taxes, to actually record that as an expense.
okay,
So it offsets the revenue that we anticipate that we're receiving. So, the deviation there would be for any appeals. So we would have had an experience where someone had a fire, lost their whole property, so they appealed for that to us, and then would go to property. If they make the change, then we would give them a credit,
okay,
as an example.
okay. Thank you very much.
I have one report left.
Moving on to your next report.
So as we prepare for, we're looking at where we are for a forecast for operating and capital, and thinking about what that might start looking like in the upcoming year. As well, one of the counselors had asked for where we were with our reserves at the last time. So tried to pull that together to give people a sense of where we were at the end of March and where we are projecting to the end of March of 2024. So for our town operating and capital and our other reserves, you'll see the balances in your report. What I'd like to share with you what is included, because you just see the net effect. So the 22-23, any deficits or surpluses that were approved by council to come out of operating reserves for any of our areas of the town or water commission or sewer, those have been adjusted. In 23-24, the budgets would have included taking money from reserves to pay for capital items or for operating items. And we also include in our budget moving, kind of replenishing those funds. They don't always net zero, so there are changes related to that. Council also approved a sidewalk repair over budget for Cornwallis, or then Bridge Street and Elm Street. That amount has been adjusted there. And we also received over $580,000 for a sustainability growth fund, which is a one-time fund that's in other reserves, which is why you see such a huge increase there. In most of our areas, the ups and downs for those transactions did not have a significant impact, but in the Kemptville Water Commission, you will see that their reserves are being depleted fairly rapidly, which is part of why we spoke about needing to consider the impact of rates on that. So that would have been part of our budget discussion as well. So helpful for you to see where those stand. I will update this again for you prior to us looking at the capital budget in the spring or winter, whatever they
Perfect.
choose.
All right, thank you. Councillor Sabian.
Thanks, Director, for that. I asked for those, and I appreciate that. When I asked, I thought, or I was looking for the actual amounts in the reserves, not a forecast.
So
yeah.
all of those would be the forecast. Those would be all the entries that are done to date. So if
Okay.
you have approved in the budget to move 241,000 to
Mhm.
operating, that is actual. That's happened because you've
Okay.
already approved it.
Okay.
But that's what we're forecasting based on all those budgets and what you've already approved. So that would be actual.
Okay.
The piece that isn't there would be if we deviate from our budget for our capital expenditures. So if
Okay.
that assumes we're gonna spend our capital budget, that assumes everything that council approved is out.
Right, so all I meant was
Yeah.
if you went into the town operating reserve for sanitary sewer, there's $506,740 there as of the 31st of October, say. That's what I meant.
There would be in
Yeah,
the books.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because we make those entries as,
Okay.
once you've approved them
Okay,
through the budget.
thank you.
You're welcome. And if there's adjustments, we'll make those adjustments as we know.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Director Matthews, you mentioned about the Kemple Water Commission and that capital reserve, that the forecast is for it to be somewhere around 428,000.
Yeah.
So this may be more of a question for Director Bell, but I'm assuming that at this juncture, we're looking at water and sewer rates and how those might change.
Our operating budget that we put forward also showed a deficit.
Yes.
So that's part of the challenge. So in combination, they all kind of paint the picture of
Yeah.
our rates may not be sufficient
Right.
to cover future needs. And I think Director Bell he's nodding.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
He may have more to add when
Okay.
he comes for his report. but
okay, thank
that's
you.
where we are now.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just wondering, under the category other reserves, what does that include?
Sure. That would be our gas tax, because we're required to report that separately. And the sustainability growth fund that I mentioned of over 580,000, that was a one-time investment from the province to us.
Okay,
And those are both used for capital purposes.
okay.
Okay.
Is, it like, do different departments have reserves? So is there reserves for recreation, is there reserves for, you know?
Any of those reserves would be embedded within the town operating, the
Town
forecast. So there's very little that, I say very little proportionally to the balance, that are specific to a department. It's
Okay.
mostly general allocation or for a specific town organizational purpose.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. And when you were talking about sewer, it just sparked my interest. Is the county paid up in their sewer bill?
No, not at this point.
Is it longstanding?
Yes. When we looked at it for audit last year, it is 3 years outstanding.
Okay.
Yeah, 21, 22, 22, 23, and we have into 23,
So
24.
basically, it's been since the arbitration?
Correct. Nothing
Perfect.
post the arbitration has been paid,
Okay, thank you.
It's that orphan year.
and beyond. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much, Director. If there's no more questions,
A volume of reports this month. My
yes.
apologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Matthews. Unfortunately, I don't have anyone here from the planning department, so I do have the report in front of you, or in front of me, along with you. Nope.
Highlights.
Oh, do you? Are you going to say it?
Happy to.
Never mind.
Sorry.
In the
don't mean
flesh,
to-
Director Bell, go for it.
Another, it's kind of
I had
my
a whole spiel, but
sub-department.
you do it.
Yeah. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Sorry I didn't get that clear with
No,
you
that's
before I
okay.
come
This
up,
is great. In the flesh.
CAO. Lindsay and Kirsten asked me to deliver the highlights. You have the complete report in front of you, but the highlights are, as you have, under development permits, there were 7 development permits issued in the month of October. It does say September, but similar to Director Matthews, they had the wrong month on their report. But for the month of October, there were 7 permits with a total building valuation of $560, almost $7,000. And the activity report is attached. And under subdivision application, there was 1 new subdivision file submitted in October. I'll skip down to special event permits. 1 special event permit was issued in October, and it's expected that it's the final permit of the year. On to, I guess, really the development side of things. Blooms on the block, trees for the community development landscaping project are being delivered this week. The install is taking place with assistance from Public Works and Stan Kochenoff. 16 flowering trees will be added along Park Street and Main Street to add color and interest to existing green spaces. Other things I guess the ladies highlighted for me were lots of inquiries regarding ancillary dwelling units in the town as a result of the provincial funding opportunities that were announced earlier in the month, and a number of inquiries from different property owners looking to rezone to increase density on residential properties in town, mostly from 2 units to higher densities. And those are the highlights of the report.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Director, and you do have some questions. Councillor Zabian.
Thanks, Director. I may steer this to the CAO. Back in October, I think it was October, Council, we had a discussion around amenity spaces, and we decided that we didn't agree with the bylaw. So just wondering where that sits and what the timeline is on that moving forward. Should Council come back with or waiting for staff to come with a recommendation, or what's the situation on that?
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor. It's still with staff. We currently actually don't have the expertise on staff to be able to address that. So again, as Director Matthews pointed out, we're working on filling gaps of staff. So maybe something that we may have to go outwards for.
Don't we have a planner temporary until the end of the year? Carolyn Roberts, yeah.
This may not be within the purview of their contract.
Okay.
Yeah.
It would be a shame to have to wait longer, you know? Yeah, because this has been since like last March. It's been almost a year now since I originally brought it forward. And we're now pressing on almost a year. And I know there's personally, I know a few developers in town that are looking to move forward with their properties, and they won't do anything until it's amended. So I don't know if it would be in the purview of a councillor to bring it forward again with a suggestion, and then see if staff then wants to push it forward. Ultimately the same thing, but I don't know.
Yep, we can take a look at it again.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. And sorry, Director Bell, this isn't really a Director Bell thing. But it's in talking about food security, as the young lady did earlier. When we replace trees around town, I have seen towns, villages, cities replace trees with fruit trees.
Right.
Is that something that we could, and again, this is a planning thing, not an engineering thing, I realize that.
Could be. I know these ones are planned are a flowering tree, like a flowering crab, or I can't remember all the names, but a variety, 5 different varieties of trees. I think, what did I say, 16 or more trees?
Yep,
16 flowering trees.
And I didn't mean change anything that's going on. I'm
No,
just
those ones are ordered and ready to
Right.
be delivered. It's something that can be looked into for sure.
Yep, okay, thank you.
No further questions. Thank you.
I'll be back.
Next up, we have Parks and Recreation with Director Langell.
Hello, Mayor, Council, how are we tonight? Good? For my report, I just kind of wanted to focus on the facility side of things, along with staffing, because we do have some staffing turnover happening currently. So administration and operations, we just posted for a conditions assessment and feasibility study for the Centennial Arena. This arena was built and opened in 1967. So it's been in operation for a long time. And it is imperative right now that we get a solid conditions assessment of the facility of where we're currently at, and what we're gonna need for the future until we can either afford to have a new facility, or the regional, if regional center comes to fruition, or looking at what we currently have, and if that meets the need of the community. So by doing this, we're looking at asking 3 questions for our consultant. The first one is, what level of financial investment will be required to keep this facility in sound operating condition until 2049, so that's 25 years. And what do we need to do to meet the facility standard of access by design 2030 from the province of Nova Scotia? So looking at all those accessibility upgrades that we need in our facilities. The second question is the current facility suitable for the current and future recreation needs of the town of Kemptville? And then the final question we'll be asking is, would the financial investments into the existing Centennial Arena be comparable to investing to a new facility in a new location? Basically is what we're trying to accomplish here, so we can give council all the information it needs to make a decision in the future. Under facilities and operations, under operations, we have Roxy Peterson, who was just recently hired as our neighborhood outreach program coordinator. So a bit about Roxy. Over his career, he's had a pleasure of supporting, leading, and guiding communities globally. That's in London, UK, across the US, and now in Nova Scotia. He has experience in youth support work, facilitating conversations, youth counseling, and he has past community engagement coordinator positions. We're really excited about him. I think anybody in our department would be very excited to have him. A very positive individual and brings a lot of experience to town. We're really excited to see what he does. On the next page, we have Jerry Little. So as everyone I'm sure is aware, Jerry Little has been with us for a long time. And his time is coming to an end in December as he's retiring from the town of Kemptville. So Jerry is known for his pumpkin people. He's known for maintaining our parks for the last 13 years. We have posted the role, and we have actually filled it internally with one of our other park employees, and they'll be starting in December. So we'll have a 3-week window to try to gain as much knowledge and experience from him, so we have a smooth transition. The last part to touch base on is capital projects. So currently we have posted requests for proposals on a conditions assessment and feasibility study, as I previously mentioned. Skate park lighting, so lighting our skate park so we can have longer use. And we have a bridge replacement going in the gorge. And then we have 5 projects that are currently on the go. We have the arena sign that has been ordered and waiting for installation. We have a Memorial Park pergola shelter going in behind the basketball court facing the playground. So that'll be a fixture for families to sit under, get away from the sun, rain, whatever it might be. We have a shelter going at the top of Burger Hill, and this will be, half of it will be facing the Burger Hill sledding hill, and the other half will be facing the bike park. So again, another sheltered area to hide away from those elements whenever they need it. Deer Haven Trails on the go, and anybody that's been down to Memorial Park has probably seen the grandstands, and is pretty much near completion now. And that's it.
All right, thank you very much for that report. Are there any questions for Director Langell? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Director Langell. So the conditions assessment and feasibility study, I have 2 questions with that. Do we have a sense of how much that will cost? And then secondly, how will that assessment and feasibility study marry with what the municipality and town of Kemptville and what that recreation, I don't know what you call that committee? Regional rec facility. How will that report marry with that committee?
Okay, so for the cost part, we have been approved $50,000 from council, which
Okay.
comes out of professional fees.
Okay.
We've also applied through CCTH, Community Culture, Tourism, Heritage, for the province for an additional $10,000 to bring it up to 60. For marrying in with the regional center, at our last meeting, phase 1 does not include arena. Phase 2 does. So our question is now, the question I would say to council is what can we do with our current facility to keep it operating until then, until the decision is made for phase 2, and when that bill comes into place.
Okay, great, thank you. And my second question is with regards to the new neighborhood outreach program coordinator. So it's kind of a general question, but what would a day in his life look like?
Okay.
Okay.
Well, right now, he's been meeting with a lot of community partners,
Okay.
Vansta, a lot of nonprofits met with the province. He is currently working on help us engage our community there.
Okay, that's great, thank you very much for that.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. I just have a question. On the sledding hill at Memorial Park, I noticed when I'm walking by there that we have the bales of hay up against some of the poles that are there.
Correct.
I'm wondering if those poles can be strung in another way so they're not on that sledding hill. Just because I don't know how effective the bales of hay are if somebody actually comes down there full tilt and hits them. And they've been working, I guess, over the years, but I'm just wondering if there's any way that we can get rid of those poles that are on that hill.
Sure, I can bring back the team and come up with some type of solution.
Yeah, or,
solution
you
to it.
know, Nova Scotia Power maybe may have a solution that we could, you know, put one over there and string the line over that way or something, just so that that hill is free of that kind of stuff. Just wondering. Okay, thanks.
Counselor York.
Thank you. This past week we went, it's a royal we, Ashley Ettinger and Chief Smith and Sergeant Reed presented on Ashley Ettinger's position, which is the Community Crisis Navigator. Interestingly, in the top 5 reasons for referral, community or neighbor dispute and family dispute was for the first time ever cracking that top 5 reasons why somebody would be working with Ashley. Is there opportunity, understanding that Ashley is further downstream in the spectrum, is there potential for Roxy to work closely with Ashley in order to sort of find out solutions upstream so that we can make some more resilient communities, so perhaps those numbers can reduce?
I think so. His experience has been through facility and conversations, so I think if there's any additional resources that are needed by KPS, he'd be more than willing to support and work together. We're all a team here, so I don't see why not.
I love that that's on the record, thank you.
Yeah. Got me.
Counselor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. It's not a question, Craig, and it's more of a comment to all of council when we talk about feasibility studies and stuff like that. I think it's time, and I've said this many times before, but I think it's time that this council have a real in-depth meeting on, are we gonna support something that's not, are we gonna support what we've seen so far? Or is it time for us to spend the money on the rink, spend the money at the park and other places? Because this has been going on, this is my 7th year as a councillor, and we've been talking about it for that long. This is our second feasibility, the previous, not the one you're talking about for the rink. And even if all 3 councils got together and said, yep, we're going ahead, we're gonna do it, we're 10 years away from opening doors after financing and funding and everything. And I think it's time to make a decision or get off the pot, basically, because either we're gonna go it alone and do what we can, or we're gonna be part of something much bigger. But just dragging it on and paying for more studies is not this study, but paying for more combined studies with other municipalities seems to be, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Last comment, I guess.
Sure.
I can share on that. Not only is the arena in need of an assessment, but we also have the outdoor pool that was built in the 1950s. We have the stadium lighting at the senior baseball field that was put in the 1940s. So we have and it's wooden. We have a lot of aging assets in our community when it comes to sport and recreation. And there does need to be a serious discussion around council, what is needed, and what we're willing to replace, and what we're willing to maybe not replace in the future. So I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you very much, Director. Holidays. You skipped
Friday.
over holidays. The
Holidays,
beautiful tree is out there today.
yes, holidays is all weekend. So make sure you're down there. I'll be down there with my family, and I hope to see everyone down there as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Chief Smith.
Good evening, council and mayor. Just a note on holidays, there will be some road closures that night for 5 to 10 minutes. Hopefully that's all it'll be. I think you seem to have some people that like to sing, which is great to hear. You have the report before you, provided by the chair of our police board, Councillor York. I guess if there's any questions on the report itself, feel free to ask. I will highlight, Councillor York kind of stole it a little bit there, but we were at the NSFM on, it was last week, and did a presentation that was very well accepted among everybody there, and a lot of feedback, and I already have people emailing me to discuss our positions. So it was very, very well received. So yes, does anybody have any questions on the report?
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Thanks for the report. I'm not sure that this speaks directly to the report, but I'm just wondering what's going on now in the province with municipal policing, where there used to, was at one time some discussion on changing municipal policing or changing the face of municipal policing, and RCMP and regional police forces and things like that. Is there anything going on with that, or is that just kind of died out? Or
Well, it hasn't died out. There's a review that's going to take place from the Mass Casualty Commission, but
Yes.
It's going to take some time. I think, don't quote me, but I think the year was 2025 when they were going to make a final report on that. So it could be, it's going to take some
a
time.
few years out yet. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Maxwell, there will be opportunities for elected officials to not only be part of the group that's going to be looking at this, but also to provide input. So keep that on your radar. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Just a question around the Community Crisis Navigator.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a position that we are looking, or that you are looking at expanding that position in the ensuing year for the upcoming budget?
There have been discussions at the board level about the position of what it could develop into, but not to the point that we've come to request for budget ask. No, not at this point. No.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Zabian.
Thanks, Chief. I have a couple of, or I have quite a few people call me, or they come in and visit with me about people driving fast in some of the subdivisions. And I know this has come up so many times. I don't think that they move those speed signs anymore, correct? I know when they were originally put in 3-4 years ago, they were moved every 6 months or every year. Just wondering, is there anything that the police department could use, for speed calming, or children playing? I know there's a couple points. I get calls in Bonavista Vista a lot as well, on the corner of Apple Tree and Blossom. There's a 3-way stop there, and I guess, I don't expect a police car to sit there all day, obviously, in all these spots, but is there some signage or something we can do that could help out? I've asked this before, and I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so I would suggest, Counselor, that they do call and ask, or make the reports, because we do, if we have an issue in a certain area, we will put more enforcement there. So if there's a concern, then we'll have as a priority. So the speed signs haven't been moved. Myself and Special Constable Harlan Wood used to move them, and it was a little safety concerning, so we stopped doing that. So right now they're in the hands of Public Works, so if they're to be moved, we have to get them to move them. Where they're at right now, I think they're in a place where they're most effective, in the sense that, they're coming into town, both ends, and in the school zones, right, Belcher Street. So, but I would say if you have residents that they should call and report, you're not bothering us, we'll take the complaint and then further follow-ups. Yeah.
And is there any signage that could be put in place in some of these spots? I know most of these people, I've advised them to call your department, and they have. And you guys have gone, and they're thankful for that. It's just, it's like anything, when you go, it doesn't happen, right? So it's like anything, when
if
you need
you're-
something, it's not there, so
Yeah,
I'm just,
so if you're referring to
yeah.
like children playing signs and those types of things.
Yeah, or slow down,
yeah.
I don't know what,
So those are conversations that would have with
Okay.
Director Bell that I've had in
Okay.
the past as well, and we've,
Okay.
they've implemented them in other areas, so yeah, there definitely are those types of
okay,
things.
all right, thank you.
Counselor York.
Thank you. And through the chair, I'm going to follow up to Councillor Zabian's. We heard a lot through the community feedback when we were talking about the Bryson development. And some of the things that were mentioned and that would be relatively easy calming strategies, I think. I say this with absolutely no training or skill in the area. But reducing speeds within communities from 50 to 30, having four-way stops or three-way stops at all the intersections, and implementing those things through, I think, a Director Bell portfolio. But we could take information that comes through KPS and sort of identify at the board level anyway, some hotspots for that kind of activity, and then maybe from there, make a case for Director Bell and for the planning department. But, so, just wanted to get that off my thought.
Thank you. Counselor Gerard.
Thank you. Just my 2 cents worth on the sort of the traffic calming. Previously, many years ago, there was issues where a previous chief moved the signs around, and a lot of the problem was perception or noise if it was a loud car as opposed to speed. But one thing I do find works really well is speed bumps. People, right, they want to slow down for those, so maybe in future developments, when we're paving streets, we say, you know what, this would be a good spot for a speed bump.
Yeah, perception is a big thing. I mean, we've done speed radar issues, you know, in certain areas, and, you know, we sit there and we record our speeds for days upon days. And, you know, for someone to say that they're going, say, 30 or 40 over the speed limit, typically they're not even close to doing that, so it's all in perception. I'm not saying all the time, but it can be. So, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Chief, no further questions. I just want to say again that the presentation by you and your folks at the NSFM Police Conference was top notch, and everyone wants to be Kentville. I'm going to tell you that. And I had more questions about the number of officers, our budget, and looking forward to that sort of stuff. So I've spoken to our commission chair with regards to giving out that information, and you know, who knows? Maybe our force will be the regional force. I'm just putting that out there. Good karma,
pressure.
baby.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Chief.
Director Bell is going to come back to the mic and do his public works report.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. I'm going to skip ahead just to some of the highlights of my report, because I also have a recommendation to follow the report. Under sanitary sewer area service, there were no direct operational issues with the service in October, but I will give an update on the regional sewer system and the ongoing upgrades at the sewage treatment plant and the recent issues with the sewage force main that pumps the majority of our wastewater to the regional plant in New Minas. The desludging of the ponds is essentially complete, and the aeration equipment is installed in cell number 2 and just beginning to be installed in cell number 1. The replacement of the force main was deferred from a previous capital budget to allocate funds to these sewage treatment plant upgrades. But the pipe is at the end of its useful life, and as I mentioned, I think last month, there have been 8 breaks that were repaired in September and early October. There were originally 2 phases remaining in the force main replacement from the dog park back to the large pumping station behind the Justice Center. But the technical subcommittee will be recommending to the regional sewer committee rather, to complete this replacement through Kentville as one large phase, eliminating all of the failing ductile iron pipe. Cost estimates are being done by the consultants now, but the project could easily be in the $4 to $5 million range. This will be cost shared by the regional partners, with the largest share being paid by the largest user, ourselves, the town of Kentville. As many of you are aware, there is a funding program out now through the province called the Municipal Capital Growth Program, MCGP, for up to 50% funding of projects to upgrade municipal infrastructure to service Nova Scotia's growing population. This is a replacement, but it could also certainly qualify because, we need this force main in order to ever grow our population, and they would, I think I say that farther down in the report, but they would, size the line appropriately. Perhaps it's a big pipe now. It's 18 inches in diameter. That's a really big force main. Most force mains are in the 4 to 6 range, and this is a massive pipe, but it's also 45 years old. So Kings County's CAO has confirmed with the province that joint applications from neighboring municipalities are not only allowed, but also encouraged. So the application deadline is December 13th, just under 1 month away. And in addition to detailed cost estimates, the application requires all applicants to submit a resolution of council. In our application, one from each of the 3 municipal partners, Kentfield, Numinus, and Kings County, supporting the submission of the project for funding consideration under this program. The intention is not only to replace the failing pipe, but to size it accordingly, as I guess I just said. So extra capacity is built in for our expected population growth in the coming years, a key part of the funding criteria. My official recommendation to council is attached as a separate document, which I will deliver after this report. Under Public Works, Canaan Avenue update, as of last Friday, the guardrail was finally, the last piece of the puzzle was finally installed on Canaan Avenue, which was why we had it closed, even though the wall has been complete for nearly a month. So the guardrail was finished by that specialty company on Friday, so Canaan Avenue was officially reopened to both vehicle and pedestrian traffic. So that's great news. One thing I didn't put in the report, but I did jot down just a capital update on one of our new fleet acquisitions, our snowplow and salt truck, which was approved for under the capital program. The truck chassis is built and delivered to the body and equipment upfitter, but with their planned December shutdown for a good part of the month, we don't expect to see the truck delivered to us until mid-January. So we unfortunately have had to re-inspect the oldest truck, the almost 11-year-old truck now that it's replacing. So we'll have to have that ready for at least the first part of the winter season until we get the new trucks, and then we will be looking to liquidate that truck as surplus equipment. An update on recent storm events and ongoing remediation and design work. At last month's CAC, in subsequent council meeting, there was a request from a member of council for Engineering Public Works to provide a summary of expenses incurred to date repairing or replacing infrastructure impacted by the storm events of August 30th and September 14th, 2023. To date, we have spent just over $85,000 on repairs to impacted storm systems in the form of replacement storm manholes and catch basins at various locations around town, and the cleaning and maintenance of existing storm sewers by third-party contractors. To clarify, we will need to spend several $100,000 on various storm systems throughout town over the next decade, especially those installed in the late 70s and 80s that are actually in worse condition than the ones maybe installed in the 50s and 60s. They were made of galvanized corrugated steel pipe. Much like the pipe that I described in the above regional sewer force main update, this product was used throughout town for both storm pipe as well as the decision at the time to use it to construct catch basins and storm manholes. We see now a bad decision, but that was something that was decided on 40 plus years ago. These catch basins, the one you see, sunken catch basins that you see along Park Street, Maine, Aberdeen, Webster, to name a few of the downtown ones, but they're in subdivisions as well, are a result of age and poor construction materials, not development or lack of maintenance. As an example, we budgeted $170,000 in our capital budget meetings last winter to replace a section of galvanized steel storm sewer between Park Street and KCA near Gary Pearl Drive. This area presented itself as a sinkhole during the August and September storms, but because the pipe had reached the end of its useful life, and its lack of integrity allowed the soils to be pulled in by the large velocity of water traveling through this pipe. So this project came in approximately 6% under budget of the 170 that it was budgeted for, but this is just the first of many that will need to happen through every capital budget over the next several years. I just want to, I guess, also clarify that the scope of the work being completed by a recently engaged engineering consultant the focus area for this is upstream of the upstream catchment area and significant erosion upstream of the Condon Avenue storm system, as well as the potential rerouting of the downstream outlet piping. They have not been engaged to complete any sort of town-wide storm study, and their focus is defined to this study area. I expect to meet with them later this month to review their findings.
But if we take questions
Absolutely.
on
Yeah.
this report. Councillor Zabian.
On the corner of Main and Chester Avenue, I get calls about that all the time.
Yep. Yes, as I did look at it, Councillor, and tend to agree that, you know, it's in front of what's now a residential private home with a driveway, and the visibility from Chester certainly could be improved by the removal of that stall. So we will at least black out probably the white lines that are there on the curb, but certainly at the very least not refresh them in the spring, and probably move the I can't remember now if there's a parking. I think the parking ahead sign is it's all along there, but if we can also put a sign that shows parking only backwards from that.
Yeah, because that property.
West of that property.
Yeah, because that property has a driveway.
Has its driveway now.
Yeah.
It was a business back when that space
Yep.
was installed a number of years ago.
And the other question I'm going to ask you, thanks to the chief for giving it to you, I'm just wondering about those speeding, those machines, we bought them, or the town did, so how come we're not using them? What's the reason that they're not in use?
Which machines? The
The
radars?
The radars, yeah.
They're all in use.
Okay.
They're in, as Chief
Okay.
Chief Smith
Or
said.
how come
they're-
they're not being moved, I guess, would be the question.
Well,
Sorry.
I agree with what, Chief, the last time they were moved by Public Works,
Mhm.
because as Chief Smith said, they were, it was something that he and Constable Wood, were doing on their own with ladders and things. So we moved them. I think the last move was done by Public Works to locations that were, in key areas, like, as he said, Belcher Street, or coming into town, school zones, those areas. If anything, I would recommend that we leave those where they are, and if it's the wish of council to invest in more, we could add that to upcoming budgets, to have 2 or 3 more that could probably be moved around. But I think those ones should stay really in a static location.
Okay. Or I guess even just to follow up, if we can get signage that says, slow down, children playing. I know I see them.
We have them, we put them out in
Yeah.
lots of subdivisions,
Right.
lots of areas. I think becomes a point where folks see them everywhere, and I don't know how effective they are for the people that just tend to speed. I mean, I'm all for, certainly for pedestrian and children's safety in subdivisions, but I'm not sure how the signs, how much effect they have. I think the digital signs are quite effective. Those ones at least are either flashing at you or in red. Some of them
Yeah.
have a red feature that really catches your eye when you're over 50 or over 40 kilometers. Currently, we can put recommended speeds of 30 kilometers,
Okay.
like on, I spoke to a resident in one of the subdivisions, and they'd like to see on a fairly tight corner, like a 30-kilometer ahead sharp bend, and we've ordered those signs to come at that corner from both directions, with one way, sort of a 90-degree left, and one to the right, obviously coming the other direction. And those can say 30. They're a yellow sign that's recommended, but really, I think
Not enforceable.
Not enforceable. The province sets the speed limits,
Right.
Essentially the minimum speed limits, or
Yeah.
max, as low as we can go is 50 for, to my understanding, for enforceable. But
Yeah, I
I'll
think,
confirm that with Chief.
Yeah, I don't know if there were some, I don't know how much those radar machines are. I don't know what the costs are, but, I mean,
4,500? 3,500?
for each
$4,000?
one.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't put those on every street, obviously.
cannot, no.
I would tend to think that if there was some signage in some of those weak spots, I know even, like I said, in Bonavista, I don't let my kids on the road. I'm yelling at them all the time to stay off the road. But I mean, where we are, it's a very, very dangerous bend there, and you've got people driving cars in, testing, because all the dealerships are out there. And of course, I'm screaming at them to stay off the road, but, you know, there are some weak points in town, and if the signage, you know, it may prevent, if one person sees it, I guess, and slows down, it's
Yep.
worth the investment, so.
It's worth that.
And the other thing I just want to make a comment about is the not so much about the flash flooding, but I was reading yesterday that, and I thought this was interesting, that West Hands has had a couple of meetings with the public, kind of like a sharing meeting, about the impacted areas. They're doing one on the 29th in Windsor and one in Hansport on the 30th to kind of, on those specific areas where there was flash flooding. And I thought that was kind of interesting because it's just it's a good way to hear from people that may have been impacted and get a little more information, because not everybody comes here, not everybody feels comfortable calling in. So I thought that, you know, maybe something down the line that might be nice to hear from the people that were impacted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. Director Bell, just a few things. So that replacement of the force main, so if we do get that grant, that will bring it down to about $2.5 million. And I think when we looked at it at Regional Sewer back in 2022, it was hovering somewhere around $2 to $2.5 million.
For one phase.
For one, that's right, for
Yeah.
one phase, yeah.
That's right.
And so with that in mind, I think a portion of that was gonna be financed, because I know we're a 52% user, but a portion of that was gonna be financed over maybe 10 or 15 years, I don't recall. But hopefully that it won't be as substantial to us as with this grant.
Certainly the 50% funding helps, and there may be other programs. Clean, can't remember the one that
The
Mayor Snow and I looked at.
Clean energy.
we got it right.
The federal government one for wastewater and water.
Wastewater, which could be, you know, possibly stacked to bring it to 75 or 6 cent, you know, dollars and,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and really help them much more. 52 is typically our operating cost share. We could actually be paying more than 51 or 2 because we are the biggest user of that force main. So sometimes the capital costs is a
right.
little different equation by time. So we don't always pay that on capital projects.
Right. No, I know.
We
Yeah.
pay maybe less on the regional and more on the force line
Right.
because it's primarily carrying Kentville waste.
Our use, yeah.
Does carry Colebrook and North Kentville, but
Yeah.
essentially none of New Minas and none of Greenwich.
Right.
So
Okay.
there's, I think, a different formula for capital costs, so we could see even a higher share than 50 or 51,
Okay.
to be determined.
With regards to updating infrastructure over the next few years, and you talked about that coming in future capital budgets. The asset management plan that, excuse me, had been worked on, is that sort of still a work in progress? It's updating that consistently with?
It is. It'll always be a living kind of document that we always update as we you know, add and replace and take over new developments that are turned over to us, new subdivisions. But certainly as we replace things like McDonald and Henry infrastructure under capital programs, or anything that we do, like the piece that we just did near KCA, yeah, that becomes part of that living document. But it is a great inventory and a heat map of sorts that shows, you know, our consequence of failure and what happens, you know, whether it's storm sewer or a main water artery has a higher level of importance. If this artery goes down that's 60 years old, what does it do? You know, does it take most of town without water for a day while we, you know, scramble to fix a line that, you know, doesn't historically have a lot of brakes on it, we'll say, because it's 60 or 80 years old. Yet it is of an age where you expect to start replacing pipes, but yet the one I think of is a water line that's coming from the old reservoir up near the old plant on Chester Avenue. The line there's 2 lines, and they vary in age from, I think, the early 60s to back almost the turn of 1900s is the oldest line. But they just chug along and haven't had brakes because the pressures are low. But yet, you know, the asset management tells us a lot of things, tells us that we should be planning to replace things like at that age, but we also look at history on it. Have we had trouble with it? No.
Right.
Did we have trouble with a pipe somewhere else that maybe, is only half as old, but different materials, you know, it was cast iron and it just is starting to fail.
Sure.
Storm systems, for sure, they're part of that asset management plan, and they give us indications, but we also know from our own history, whether it be, you know, catch basins that you see, and we know which ones are made out of galvanized pipe on their end, which is what a lot of those catch basins are that you see, particularly along Park Street and Cornwallis Street and around the square, Webster and Aberdeen. They're galvanized pieces of pipe on their end to make a manhole, because that was economical to do in the 80s and late 70s when that pipe was readily available and concrete was twice as much maybe. Would have been a better investment looking at it now to have used concrete. I mentioned that, I think, even about early phases of McDougall Heights. You think of that as a new subdivision, but it, you know, the first phase of Acadia Drive up to the Dalhousie intersection was built in the late 80s. And it's, that storm system is galvanized. And it was allowed under our subdivision bylaw then in 89, or I think in that vintage. And I think, you know, it was explained to me by actually the designer of that subdivision, who I now play pickleball with, told me, had to get in there somehow. He told me at the time, he was the project manager for that phase of McDougall Heights, and it got tendered to local contractors here, and because it was in our bylaw to permit that use of that material, the consultants had it priced both ways in their tender form, and it came in so much a foot for corrugated steel pipe, galvanized pipe, and so much a foot more to go to concrete. And it was probably, even if it was $10 a foot more at the time, 30 years ago, to go to concrete. And that first phase was 1,000 feet or so to get up to the corner of Dalhousie. That first pipe, I guess it was recommended to the town engineer from the consultant to bring it to council, to, you know, potentially have the town pay the difference. Because, you know, the developer obviously was going to pay for the cheapest option because it was permitted under our bylaw. But, so $10 a foot more at 1,000 feet, that's 10 grand more. I guess council of the day, 30 years ago, decided not to do that and to go in with the minimum standard. But if we go to replace that now, 30 years later, it's going to cost us $500,000. You know, to tear up all the streets to replace those.
Right.
So it's, decisions were made, but we've got lots of materials or lots of streets that aren't that old that have some pipes. Not to say they're not sized right, it's to say that just they're materials that don't meet today's standards and just have a short useful life of 30 to 40 years, and those years are almost up.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Interesting.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. Dave, I'm just wondering, when, like, we've got a lot of catch basins that need to be repaired, is there an estimate on what that's gonna cost? But more importantly, and I don't know a whole lot about plumbing, but I know that if you fix a spot here, 6 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet down the line with rigid piping, and it doesn't seem to make any difference whether it's plastic, whether it's cast, or whether it's galvanized. It affects it.
Dissimilar materials, if you're trying to fix it with one thing and you've still got.
No, I mean, fixing a problem here
Yeah.
usually affects something down, something
Yeah,
gets tugged,
I guess that's
something
what I
gets
mean.
pulled.
Yeah, it pops up somewhere else, there's no question. But you can easily spend, you know, the catch basin may only be you know, $3,000, but the time you dig the old one out and put a new one in and pave around it, you can drop $10,000 to $15,000 on every catch basin.
And my
that's
next
just-
question would be, you remember years ago paint saver or pavement savers?
Yep.
It would make sense, and that's a preventative maintenance thing, and I don't
Yep.
think that the maintenance was the issue at all, but I would think it would increase the longevity of these catch basins if we could get them patched so that water can't, I mean, as soon as you get water down there in the
It's
winter.
water, and it's salt water in the winter,
Yep,
too.
it
It's a lot of that.
displaces things and.
Plastic and concrete aren't as susceptible to the elements that the galvanized pipe was. I mean, some of that stuff had a tar lining in it in the pipe when the pipe was on the flat, but even that would end up in 10 years at the bottom of the pipe, because it all sloughed down, and then you had a big glub of gooey tar at the bottom of the pipe. But when they're on end, and most of them didn't have that, sort of that bituminous lining in them, but when they're used for catch basins, it was just a bad decision. But we've got other ones. We've got wooden ones in town that were made out of, 4x4s. So they were, tight budgets and different ideas of building materials or construction materials in the 70s and 80s.
I'd go, if it was me, I'd go back to cast. I know the cost would be,
Oh, precast, yes,
Yep.
for sure. Oh, no, concrete's the only real acceptable standard now for catch basins, and really almost for the pipe. It's still the Cadillac of storm sewer, not just for the manholes and catch basins, but for the pipe itself. We do use the corrugated polyethylene because it's rust resistant, but I think the concrete is still the best pipe. Depends on the size. Once you get past about 30-inch, concrete's more affordable anyway than the large diameter, high-density poly.
thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Director Bell, can we talk about the force main for a little bit?
Sure thing.
It goes down down our trail system. And I guess it would mean that from Justice Center down to Eves Hollow, our trail would be closed while we're doing this work?
Pretty much. The route it takes is, from through the back parking lot of the Justice Center, from the big pumping station, cuts across where the boardwalk is. There was a break there 2 winters ago, I believe, so that's kind of the route. We have to leave the other one in place, of course, during construction to keep it active, because we move 1 million gallons or more a day to New Minas through that line. So it would be twinned far enough away from it, and so somewhat of a new path, and it goes down Klondike Street, and then doesn't go down the trail from Leverett in. It kind of goes around the end of Klondike and then cuts its way into the, crosses Mill Brook and into the trail that way, and under the brook, I guess, by the curling club, but all the way to the dog park. So, it potentially means that unless they go certainly off to one side far enough, but I don't think that's feasible. There'll still be construction equipment all the way along the Harvest Moon Trail. So during construction, I see a prolonged closure of the trail in the future,
Okay. And the current pipe is ductile iron.
Correct.
What's it going to be replaced with?
Most likely what the other phases were. They've done, I think, 3 main ones. I think there was a small 4th one, but really 3 big phases starting at the plant 15 years ago, 10, 12 years ago now, I think. High-density polyethylene, so very thick extruded
Life estimate?
polyethylene. Pardon me?
Life estimate?
60 years.
Okay.
That was installed, the last phase was installed essentially from Eves Hollow, east towards New Minas, all the way to the what do they call that? Not the Belcher connector, but the one I mean.
Middle Dike.
Middle Dike connector, thank you. Under that, it was kind of built in phases, or replaced in phases, starting at the plant and working back towards Kentville. But the last phase was from Eves Hollow to a few hundred feet past under the overpass, past that direction. Pretty much size for size. The old force main's 18-inch ductile iron. Most of this was replaced in the last 3 phases with the same size pipe, but it's a smoother walled pipe, so a little better, a little less friction, so a little more ability to pump more gallons a minute without increasing the head too awful much more. Couple sections were directionally drilled because at the time there was quite a washout along the trail, if you remember. So they used, rather than digging it, they actually went down super deep and used directional drilling for a couple thousand feet. That became a thicker walled pipe because it needed to be tougher because the way it was being pulled by the equipment. So in order to get the same size inside of the pipe, I'm giving too much detail, I realize, but it had to be a thicker walled pipe. So they went up to a pipe size larger, so I think that was 21 inch, but essentially it was still 18 inches on the inside. So all that pipe is that size. I suspect they'll upsize. They're asking us, and they've asked through me to Kirsten in planning, you know, on our forecast for growth. But it's a hard thing to put a number on. You know, we know we're going to open up several hundred acres over the next number of years that could be medium to high density. So I told them the potential was for the population to double in 10 to 15 years. I don't think that's unrealistic. So they may upsize this phase at least one pipe size to say 21 inch or maybe even 24. Would they run out and change the other ones? No time soon. It would just mean they may need a little bigger pumps at the station in order to squeeze it through the 18-inch line, but it would be more efficient if it was all 21 or 24-inch pipe. But ours will, this phase will no doubt be bigger than what's being decommissioned.
Okay.
That's still to be determined, which will drive that price up a little bit. And it's a very volatile market on that product because it's tied to the petroleum, pricing, and so that's why I'm saying, 4 to 5 million. It could come in higher depending on when they get it to tender and what the current market prices are on that pipe. But it's almost certain that's the type of pipe it will be. That's what was chosen for the previous 3 phases.
Okay. And that pipe at that size will be able to handle the pressures in that force main? Because we know that that's what's creating our issues right now.
There isn't a lot of pressure because, it's along the trail and the trail is so flat. The station that was replaced 7 or 8 years, closer to 10 years ago, I guess now, down behind the Justice Center, used to be quite close to where the new bridge is today, by that north end of the Justice Center. The new one was set back farther from the travelway of Cornwallis Street by the new bridge. Those are I can't remember now, 75 horsepower, big pumps. So they hardly ever shut off. And some of the reasons for that is they found back in the 90s, in 2000s, on the previous station, the pumps would cycle on and off, and the force line's fairly flat because it follows the old railway bed, the trail. So there's not a lot of static head on that pipe. It's just the pressures that are built up because you're trying to squeeze 1 million gallons through a certain size pipe, and that's just a function of, it's a head loss equation. So if the pressure you're creating is because you're trying to put so much through a pipe of a certain size. So there isn't a great deal of, in terms of PSI. There's lots, like our water mains have way more pressure than that pipe does. It may only have 40 PSI on that pipe, and that's mostly friction. There's very little difference in elevation from Kentville to the plant in New Minas. So it's mostly a long force main. I guess what I started to say was they put those pumps, even on the previous big pump station and now the newer one that's set back farther from the road, on drives that keep the pumps running all the time. And there's not the starts and stops, because they were finding when the pump started and stopped, it's so long and so flat, it kind of, like a big tidal wave, kind of goes back and forth until it finds a weak spot and the pipe breaks. Having it run and churn all the time. It may not run 24/7, but it runs 20+ hours a day, and sometimes maybe it does run 24, certainly on wet weather days when we have lots of rain infiltration into the sewer system. They never shut off, but they just can vary their pump speed and therefore their output so many more gallons a minute through the pumps to keep that line running. And they found in the past that since they've done that, they've had way less breaks. These breaks aren't a function of pressure or that, they're just a function of the end-of-life pipe that's both the salt marsh has attacked it from the outside because it's ductile pipe and it's susceptible to salt corrosion and just degradation of the ductile outside. But the inside was originally lined with like our water lines are, they're ductile, with a thin layer of cement mortar. It's only a 1/16 of an inch thick, but it keeps, on a drinking water system, that cement lining keeps the pipes from tuberculating up. It keeps them clean. Nothing sticks to that pipe like they do when old cast lines build up. But from 45 years of scouring and having some sediment and silt in your wastewater, it's worn that lining off. So the pipe is basically tissue paper thin on the bottom from both the inside being worn off from the scouring and the outside being deteriorated just from the elements. So that's why it's not much left of it.
Okay. So these new pipes will give us our return on investment of that $5 million.
Oh, yes, for sure.
Okay.
I mean, nothing lasts forever, but they'll last a good number of decades, for sure.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, moving on to your recommendation.
Yeah, I don't know that I need to go through it all again, but the origin is pretty straightforward. The subject is a joint application with the other municipalities for this municipal capital growth program. A requirement is that to make the application, which the County of Kings will be doing, as they're the owner, we're a user, but we are a substantial user. But they require a resolution from council supporting the submission of an application to this program for up to 50% funding for the replacement of the force main, ductile iron force main from Justice Center to Eves Hollow. And the budget implication, as I mentioned, it's up to 50% funding for an estimated $4 to $5 million project. And that number may actually change because they're, as part of the application, there were two key things. They need the resolutions from all the municipal partners, and they need a detailed estimate. So I have not seen that estimate as of yet, but I'm guessing it's in that ballpark. And maybe they'll come in maybe their estimate will be 5 to 6, but I'm thinking based on the previous tender a year plus ago for a smaller phase, roughly half the phase, that it was in the 2 or 2 point something million. So this one, that's why we're thinking 4 to 5. And the recommendation is as follows. That Kentville Town Council support the joint application with the Village of New Minas and the applicant and asset owner, the municipality of the County of Kings, for up to 50% funding through the Municipal Capital Growth Program for the replacement of the force mains from, this is plural, I should clarify that, for the force mains from the Justice Center to the end of the existing ductile iron pipes, and that's plural as well, near Eves Hollow. Should have explained that first. It isn't just the 18-inch line. There is a second line that we often think is ours, but it is part of the regional system. It was put in at the same time back in the late 70s. That goes from the curling club. There's a large, not nearly as large, but it's still a large pumping station down at the back of Blues Cap Curling Club that has an 8-inch force main that runs parallel to this 18 that pumps a fifth or so of our wastewater from that end of town. Sort of everything that comes down Chester. Prospect comes this way and goes towards down Cornwallis Street, but everything Chester and east of Chester Avenue all the way to the town line goes essentially to the 2 pumping stations, but mostly the one behind the curling club. So that is its own dedicated force main. It's also ductile. It's also 45 plus years old. So it would only make sense to replace that at the same time. The regional committee treats that as part of the regional system, even though it's sort of our pumping station that we maintain at the curling club. They consider and all through the previous phases that I mentioned happened over the last 10 or 15 years, they've replaced both pipes at the same time, the 18 and the 8. So we would do the same this time, and maybe that's a 21 and a 10 or something in that nature, but at least as big as what's there, and both pipes at the same time. But that's still included in that $4 to $5 million estimate.
Okay.
So I guess I completed the wording of the recommendation, but it's plural, it's pipes, it's 2 pipes.
All right,
Both.
very good then. So the motion on the floor would be that CAC recommends approval to council for support of the joint application with the Village of New Minas and the applicant and asset owner, the municipality of the County of Kings, for up to 50% funding through the Municipal Capital Growth Program for replacement of the force mains from Justice Center to the end of the existing ductile iron pipes near Eves Hollow. Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Huntley, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that CAC recommend approval to council for support of the joint application with the Village of New Minas and the applicant and asset owner, the municipality of the County of Kings, for up to 50% funding through the Municipal Capital Growth Program for the replacement of the force mains from Justice Center to the end of the existing ductile iron pipes near Eves Hollow. Is there any discussion on this matter? There being no discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is that CAC recommend approval to council for support of the joint application with the Village of New Minas and the applicant and asset owner, the municipality of the County of Kings, for up to 50% funding through the Municipal Capital Growth Program for replacement of force mains from Justice Center to the end of the existing ductile iron pipes near Eves Hollow. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Director.
Thank you. Good evening.
CAO.
Thank you, Director Bell. Moving on to administration. So we have 4 reports under this section. I'm going to start with the CIO report just quickly. You have the report in front of you. There are a few things I just wanted to touch on. The first bullet there talks about the executive leadership team, and that's what we're going to be referring to moving forward as the staff team that consists of directors, the chief of police, the CIO, and supported by the deputy town clerk. As you can tell by the staff presentations, we have a staff that are very passionate about their work and quite knowledgeable and are experts in all of those areas. And also, we're asking people to come together and focus on the work within the organization. So you're hearing staff tonight who are presenting on the work of the organization and the stuff that goes out to the public. And we're also starting to gather together and do the work of how we create a more resilient organization, one that is more effective, more accessible, all of those things that ideally will attract new staff and continue to keep the staff that we have. So I appreciate everyone who's on that lead team, that executive leadership team with me. It's certainly really important work, and I appreciate everything that you're doing. Staff continue to hold interviews for the vacant positions. You've been hearing the various directors tonight talking about some of the positions that have been filled and some of them that are still vacant. We continue to do that and continue to find different ways to promote it and recruit those positions. That is something that is consistently ongoing and also adds to the work of the directors. The last piece, just under council related, around the provincial pilot project. So at the last meeting, council had asked for a letter to be written and then submitted to the province. That has happened. I have heard from the province that they have received the letter and they are working on their response. And other than that, there are no further updates at this time. And that's my report.
Thank you, CAO. Are there any questions for the CAO on this report? Oh, you're getting off easy.
I feel like everyone's exhausted. So I'm going to hand it over right now. The next on the list is our 2023 annual resident survey. I've asked our recording secretary to put that report together, and so she's going to present that. She did a great job on it and has put it together in a really nice package.
Ooh. Not yet.
Everyone see that okay? Thank you very much, everyone. I'm very glad to have so many people in the audience tonight, and I hope that many of you had a chance over September to fill out the resident survey. I'm very pleased at the response that we had this year. It was our first survey, and we're really glad to hear back so much from residents. And so I'll just take you through some of the highlights of this survey. The goal was really to learn more about what residents want more of, what they want less of, and how staff can do better. And I know that the teams that CAO Bedingfield is talking about a lot of these issues are coming up at those tables so that we can improve services, improve policies, and identify ways that we can do better for the town. Okay. Okay. 2 screens here. So the survey, the survey ran for 30 days and consisted of 53 questions from a number of categories. And I'm going to run you through a few of those categories tonight. And I'm really pleased that we had responses from 876 people. This is around a response rate of 15% based on the population of the town. And that's statistically, that's a pretty good response rate for a survey of this type. So the first thing we wanted to do is to make sure that we were reaching as many people as we could in the town. So we wanted to know who was responding to the survey. It wouldn't do us any good if we were only reaching a certain part of the population of Kentville. So we asked a lot of questions about who you were, who was responding. So we wanted to know, so here's a snapshot of who took the survey. Most were Kentville residents, but we did also feel really strongly about having people respond who had a connection to the town. So if they work in the town, if they own a business in the town, we wanted to include those people, those ideas and those experiences as well. We heard from folks who were new to town, but also some who have lived here for a long time, 20 years, less than 5 years. So I feel like we got a spread of people from new people to long-term residents here. We wanted to know how people felt about their own health. We have a lot of recreation and health programs, and we want to see if residents feel like their health is improving over time. So our baseline that we heard from residents was that they felt when they rated their own health out of 10, the average in this survey was about 7.6. So that will be, I'm really glad that people are, above 5 and they're quite healthy. They feel that they're quite healthy, and we hope to see that number increase over time. We also asked residents about transportation and active transportation. So a little bit of information here. We found that people don't use the bus. Many people don't use the bus. A number of people do use the bus. But the main reason why they report that they weren't using the bus was time. So whether that's their own schedule, the bus schedule, or waiting. So we definitely want to learn more about that particular answer, especially now that King's Transit is doing their own public engagement and their own kind of self-assessment. We're really happy to see how many active transportation methods that residents and folks who are in Kentville are using. And these little icons show that people are walking and running and biking, and that's supposed to be an e-bike, skateboarding, and they're rolling in their wheelchairs, and they're inline skating, and they're on their scooters. So our recreation staff really wanted to get a sense of what are people using and what do people want to do more of. So home energy, we are starting to think about some energy efficiency and financing programs for residents. And so we asked about their home heating. We learned a little bit about what most people are using to heat their home. Most people are using electricity and oil, but we're really glad to see that a number of people also use renewable energy. Residents are interested in making their own home energy more efficient. They're interested in adding renewables and using low-interest financing programs. So this was really interesting. We talked about safety in the town. We wanted to ask about people's perceptions of safety and perceptions of problems in the town. And we were really glad to see that most people have a really strong feeling of safety in the town of Kentville. And they described many problems that they perceived in the town. We were quite happy to see how many people were aware of the Community Crisis Navigator program, which Chief Smith talked about earlier today. And lastly, we wanted to know how people want to reach us and how we should be reaching them. So if we could create the best communication model for the town that we possibly could, what would that look like? And so we got some information back from folks about the best way that they want us to reach out to them and the best way that they want to be able to reach out to us. So if you have any questions about the survey, please feel free to email me or give me a call, and otherwise I'm happy to answer some questions after I close this down, because this is complicated.
Thanks, Jen. I appreciate that. So that's just, I really appreciate that synopsis. This is the type of information that we're hoping to do more of, just little quick check-ins with our community. And we appreciate everyone that answered the survey, because it provides us with information that where we can make better decisions and bring more complete information back to council. I'll pass it over if there's any questions for Jen.
Certainly. Yep, we've got questions. Councillor York.
Thank you. So thinking specifically from my role on the Inclusion and Access Committee, about 30% of Nova Scotians identify as having one or more disabilities, but only 14% of our respondents did. So I just want to make sure that maybe in the next survey we're thinking about how better to capture all of our residents, and if there was a barrier for being able to participate somehow. I recognize that it was online, and but maybe factoring that into our communications and workability, just as a point that I would be remiss to leave on the table.
If I could respond to that, I'm really looking forward to using the Neighborhood Navigator in the future to more effectively reach out to populations that we didn't hear enough from. We want to hear more from certain groups. That's for sure. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, that seems to be all the questions. You're good?
Just one question.
Okay.
I thought I had, by the looks of the graph, you said the folks that are heating their house with renewable, do you have a percentage? Because it looked like a fairly big percent, but I don't think that graph was meant to be accurate. And
So that graph is directly from the responses, and you can see the full responses at the bottom of
Okay,
the
that's-
report
yep.
in your council meeting package.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jen.
To you.
So also under administration, we have a housing and community partnership report. Normally I read that, but we happen to have Alicia Christie here tonight, so I'm going to hand it over to her.
Amazing. Definitely putting this into use. In case anyone hasn't pressed the button before, it does go lower.
It works so well.
It's really luxurious everywhere I go. I'm the same size as podiums, so this is amazing for me. Yeah, thanks, folks. So my name's Alicia Christie. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm working as the Housing and Community Partnerships Coordinator. It's great to see you, Council and Mayor, and hello to our community who's here this evening. You have this report in front of you, so I'm not going to read it bullet by bullet, but the summary of this one is really speaking to part of my role is keeping you folks up to date on national and provincial strategies. When you are in spaces like NSFM, if those questions are coming up, you have some catch points knowledge ready to go, and also acknowledging how that impacts us as a municipality when these plans are put in place. As we know, we inherently have a role, kind of speaking to Becca's quote from Mayor Savage early on, and the impacts in communities. So high level, there's a few bits of operations of staff attendance to various conferences, both of which staff were invited to present, which was part of being there, and a unique opportunity I do want to point out with Acadia University and a national SHIRK funding. If folks in the room might not know what that means, it's the highest regarded social research funding that's available in Canada. So through our partnership with Homeless No More, we've been invited to be part of that, which gets us on a national scale, which is pretty cool. The second page of that report, the main pieces of it are the clickable links to the Provincial Housing Needs Assessment and the Provincial Housing Action Plan, which we will dive into together here in a minute. And in those paragraphs above, it speaks to when the document was provided to staff as an embargoed document, specifically for the Housing Accelerator Fund application, and that was provided to all 49 municipalities for their specific housing needs assessment. And then it became unembargoed on October 23rd, as did the provincial, alongside with the Housing Action Plan, which is why we're in front of you today after those announcements, just to make sure you've got it all. So do you want to do questions on that and then the presentation?
Yes. Okay.
beautiful. Are there any questions for Alicia?
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Hi, Alicia.
Hi.
The Housing Accelerator Fund.
Yeah.
Do we know how much we've received from that yet?
Well, we haven't received anything.
Or how much we might be expecting?
Yeah, so what we do know is when you apply, the funding is based on possible units that could be permitted based on this, like, changes within your municipal jurisdiction. For us, if we were to receive our full unit build out of the funding, it would be 7.7 million. However, we have been told by CMHC that no applicant is receiving their full request dollar amount because they had such an uptake in the funding, particularly in the Atlantic provinces. So that says something, I'd say. So much so, yeah, so to answer the question, what we submitted is we're 7.7 based on their calculations. However, if we are successful, I'm going to say when we're successful, just, why not?
Yeah.
We would get less than 7.7 is what we've been told. What that would be, I'm not sure, but they have told us that if we are successful, we would know about a contribution agreement in December, which from CMHC standards in my mind is by December 31st. So it might be pretty late, and it would mean we would enter a contribution agreement in 2024 for the 2024 to 2027 fiscal years.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yep.
So Alicia, we were at the NSFM conference last week, and Minister Lohr was there numerous times.
Yes.
And one of, I'm going to say, the real big issues is the fact that municipalities are looking for money directly from the feds. And so I guess the question is, do we want money directly from the feds, or do we want it stopgapped at the province and doled out to us when they have matching funds?
This is such a hot topic right now. It was all over the radio last week as well. And just to add context, so last week we were invited to present at the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness Conference, and MP Sean Fraser, the Federal Minister of Housing, was also there. And the premiers from across Canada were in Nova Scotia this week. And some of you may have heard through media sources that the premiers asked the federal government of why were we left out of this funding? Why were we not the third party sign off to say? And the MP's response, so Sean Fraser's response, is that that's not something they're looking into, that the funding will continue to come from federal government to municipalities, and that's what they're moving forward with. And when we dive into the provincial housing action plan, that hopefully identifies some potential funding avenues for us that could match the particular objectives within the Housing Accelerator Fund. So what we know right now is they're not considering that. But I haven't seen that signed off in writing. So take my word as it is right now, I guess. Yeah, does that answer the question for you?
It does, thank you.
I mean, match funding is great at any point, but it would change the process. Right now, we would hear directly from the federal government in December. If we added the provincial government, it would then go provincial government. We wouldn't, I don't know when we would know after that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Councillor Gerard?
No, I'll wait.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
All right.
This presentation, Jennifer, am I finding it on here?
It's on the desktop. It should be one of the icons in the upper left.
The upper left? Oh, if I come out of the previous presentation. Oh, yep, there it is. How convenient. All right, I'm just gonna switch this to presentation mode. From beginning. Okay. Can you see it on that side? Oh, here we go. Beautiful. All right, so we're going to dive into, and I'm going to keep it quick. There's definitely some numbers going to be thrown at you. Again, this is all contextual, just to make sure you're up to date on what's being released at the provincial level, as well as get an overview of the Kentville Housing Needs Assessment, as I'm sure will be very interesting to many folks in the room. Sandra already kicked us off with a land acknowledgement, so I will skip on past that. We're going to cover our own needs assessment, the provincial first, then Kentville, and what this means for us. So across Mi'kma'ki, we're witnessing and experiencing the impacts of the housing and homelessness crisis, which really what motivated the province into the commitment for the housing needs assessment to better understand this crisis that we're working through. And the initial intent of doing so was for municipalities to be able to apply for the Housing Accelerator Fund. For your context, if municipalities did not have an up-to-date housing needs assessment, you would lose about 10 points on your application. It was a point-based. And what it did, in order to receive the full 10 points, municipalities had to commit to a renewal of the assessment. The province is not committed to renewing it for each municipality. So when we submitted, we put a letter from the CAO noting that we would use funding from the HAF application to do a reassessment within the 3-year funding span. So ideally, those funds are going to cover the cost for us to do so. So this is, again, the clickable links for the Nova Scotia Housing Needs Assessment and the Kentville one, which doesn't have a current public clickable link. We can definitely add that on our website, no problem, but it is publicly available upon request. No questions asked. So to dive into the provincial one, the 4 things that the province mainly heard, if we were to theme it, was on availability and affordability, social and economic impacts, appropriate supply, particular housing supply, and the connections to our housing and transportation. So when asked what residents went without in order to afford rent or mortgage, essentially housing payments, many went without leisure or social activities, 48% foregone clothing or personal items, and you can see further items noting their groceries, medications, and healthcare expenses. Everyone in this room is feeling the pressure of this. I don't have to say that more than once. So 93% of survey respondents did not feel confident that they could find adequate housing if their situation was to change. This is comparable to the town of Kentville statistics, with 83% of respondents feeling the same way. In contradiction to Jennifer's survey, we had a lot less at the provincial level complete this survey. There was not 800 residents complete this. It was under 100 participants. So we know this paints a very particular picture, but is still valuable data, I can't even speak right now, data for us to consider. One interesting thing is that provincially, households with more than 130,000 annually, or that's what's required to afford a median single or semi-detached home in Nova Scotia. And households with $40,000 a year in 2016 could afford 48% of the housing stock. However, in 2022, only 12% of folks with the same income could afford the median housing stock price. Sorry, this is showing up smaller than expected, so if this is hard to read, forgive me. I will read the statistics to you. So in the provincial language here on housing types, in 2021, 14% of couples or partners could afford the median price of housing versus 2022 only, sorry, I'm saying that incorrect. 14% of their income was required to purchase the median price of housing versus 19 in 2022. For lone parent or caregiver, you can see that changed by about 8%. The most dramatic change are for single or unattached individuals, going from 46% of their annual income to 60%. So what the data states is that Nova Scotia needs almost 105,000 units by 2032 to meet the projected and increasing demand, essentially meeting 10,500 units a year to address the current shortage and anticipated demand. Why it feels important to bring this data to you folks, because as you know, when we're talking about these numbers need to be permitted by municipalities. So even though it's a provincial target, we play a role in these statistics. So Nova Scotia needs to build 72,000 units in the next 5 years to meet the demand. So in response to the data, the province came out with their housing action plan, which Minister John Lorb would have been a big part of that. This is their big quote, if they were to answer, what is the housing action plan? It's essentially a commitment of $1 billion to respond to the housing crisis, and particularly focused in the next 5 years. So not looking out past that, it's really within that time frame. And essentially, there's a focus on the backyard suites, which we've heard an influx in. The province does have a what's the word I'm looking for? A rebate program almost for up to $25,000 for 50% of the cost of a backyard suite, because they're naming a shortage of 27,000 units. So in Kentville, particularly within the plan, we are mentioned on these 3 particular points, specifically around public housing. There was about 22 public housing units announced to come to the town of Kentville, where those are located. I'm not sure at the time. We'll be waiting for the provincial announcement on that, and that there is more units with individuals living with varying abilities to be built in 2024. And then they've increased funding commitment to Open Arms, particularly through the Oasis Shelter program. So let's get into Kentville and what ours looks like. So for us, we have a population growth rate of 6%, which is higher than the provincial average of 5%. We are one of the quickest growing communities across Nova Scotia in many ways for what we offer and what we provide in community and our location to the city and etc. We all live here for a reason, perhaps, and that in our context, we would need to permit 385 units by 2027 and 790 by 2032. So an average of 85 units a year to meet the demand. Our historical data shows that we permit about 61 units on average per year. And in talking to our engineering and planning department, they feel quite confident about that 85 units per year, particularly in Kentville. However, we know how connected we are to the surrounding municipalities. So even if we have the 85%, what does it look like in Kings County? What does it look like in Wolfville or Middleton, Berwick, etc.? Will we still feel pressures in different communities? And that our rental vacancy rate is 1.8% in 2022.
0.8.
Thank you, that is the correct information, 0.8. So similar to the table I had before, the amount of income required in Kentville to afford the local sale price of homes, it's about 71% of partners' income, 93% of lone or single parents, and 98% of single or unattached adults. The numbers are quite similar when we're talking about the cost of rent and the impact on folks and their income. We know this is a result of intersectional factors, the influx of folks moving to Nova Scotia, the constant rise of cost of living, the interest rates that are impacting us, and the general lack of housing stock. There's so many more things that we could put on this list, especially thinking of our already built housing stock and that it's aging, and the requirements to update a lot of existing buildings to meet different fire codes if we wanted to switch them into apartments, etc. Just based on the age of some of our buildings. That's a very real issue that's intersecting here. As a municipality, when we're looking at these intersectional issues, the main crux of it that we have impact on is the housing stock. We do permitting. We're not building the units per se, but we can contribute in that way. So in response, we have applied for the Housing Accelerator Fund to commit to multiple things. Overall, when you submit the fund, it's considered a housing action plan from your municipality, but overarching, our submission focuses on streamlining what it means as a municipality, particularly around inspections, since we've heard that that's slowed down a lot of development processes, reworking our policy and really evaluating where we can have more inclusionary zoning around housing and what's possible in our community. We have applied for the National Reaching Home Funding, which helps, again, similar things, and continue to work within community and our provincial partners to see what's possible. The landscape of housing and homelessness is absolutely unlike anything we've witnessed before, and we have an opportunity to reimagine what this looks like for us. So I really invite us to think about the question, how might we? That's the question that's in my workspace every day and my touch point, and ask us to think outside the box. We all know what housing can mean and what it means to lose it as well. I know for me, I have a hand-drawn drawing of my childhood home in my workspace as a reminder of what we're doing when we're talking about housing. And if anyone in this room has a connection to not being able to access a place you love, or perhaps it doesn't exist, or you had to leave it quite dramatically. You know what it means when we're talking about a home today and homes in our community. So thank you for listening. I hope I caught the essence and didn't throw too many numbers at you, but there is those clickable links as well, and happy to chat through it. And if you do have more questions of the province, I'm happy to relay it, particularly through the Municipal Housing and Affairs. They're happy to take questions on that. So yeah.
All right.
There it is.
Thank you very much, Alicia. Councillor York, please.
Thank you. I recognize that identifying the gap and the need is the first step in this long sequence of things that needs to happen. Is there any discussion at the provincial level about how to increase those boots on the ground things, like plumbers, like electricians, like carpenters, to make sure that when we have in Kentville 800 or 85 units a year that need to be built, it's difficult to get somebody to come in and fix your water heater at this point because they're at capacity. So I'm wondering if that conversation is being had, those sort of next step conversations. And additionally, is there anything, and perhaps this is not a you question, but certainly I would put it out there. Is there anything that the town can be doing to incentivize further those auxiliary dwelling units so that we can, when we speak of units, so sorry, this is a broken in half thought because it kind of...
You do what you need.
Okay. Auxiliary dwelling units counts as one unit, predictably. When we discuss 85 units needed, is that one bed unit, or is that like a multiple mixture of units? What does unit look like? And then additionally, can we incentivize auxiliary dwelling units within the town to kind of jumpstart that ahead?
So I heard 3 questions. I'm just going to make sure I got it.
I buried the lead there with one question.
It's amazing. So there was one around the support around the actual being able to build, or the infrastructure and the skills force and workforce to do so. A question around what is a unit when we're talking about a unit, and the accessory dwelling units, and can we incentivize those?
Thank you for succinctly capturing
No,
that.
I'm making sure I got it. That's important. So the first one on the what is a unit, which is maybe the second one. When we're talking about a unit, it's kind of that idea of like an apartment or a single detached home. So when you permit a single attached home, Dave, totally correct me if I get this completely wrong, we'll consider that one unit. But if it's an apartment building with 50 apartments, there's 50 units. Okay. Even if the apartment has 3 bedrooms, it's one unit. Oh, we passed the test, which is great. So there's the unit question. In regards to the workforce, if you remember, I guess it would have been January of this year. I hope my brain's remembering that correctly. If it's not January, then it was 2022. The province released their 1-year housing action plan. It had 4 commitments. I believe the 4th commitment listed was their investment through NSCC and their particular trades program. Does that fix it now? Who's to say? But that was their commitment there through the workforce. That's what I know. There could be more things happening on that. I'm just currently not aware, but I'm happy to look into it to get some more answers, because that's good information to know. And in regards to the accessory dwelling units, when that was announced on, I think it's October 25th is what's in my head, or 13th, one of those. When the accessory dwelling incentive was announced, we did reach out to the Department of Municipal Housing and Affairs to get clarity. How would residents apply? Is it immediate rebate? Is it over a year? Is it a loan structure? What is it? And they informed us that they were going to release more information. Pretty sure they said November 14th, and that's today. So we will stay tuned, but we made a commitment that we've pre-prepared a website page. So once that's ready, we can reference residents there of here's how the program works, here's the Kentville permits, here's what's allowed, kind of like that general, when we're talking about accessory dwelling units in Kentville, this is what it looks like, and here's what the financing program looks like. So once we have that link, we can circulate that to you folks, so when constituents are asking you questions of that, you can have that readily available. Did we get them?
You got them. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Alicia. How do we go from the money's available to actually building the buildings? There was millions of dollars available through COVID. There have been millions of dollars available. There have been needs assessments done. And my council peers are going to get sick and tired. Some of the people out here are going to get sick and tired. the province has created, and now I know part of this is federal, why would anyone want to access provincial money to be restricted and capped and build things? So we don't need more $3,500 a month apartments or $2,500 a month apartments. We need more $800 a month apartments that are safe and clean, you know, that type of thing. But we're in an atmosphere where this is where rents are. So why would I build down here when I can build these and know that I'm going to fill them? And I'm skeptical. You name people's names in the federal government, for example, and you go, that's who was in charge when the ship was sinking. And you know, these people are throwing money at problems, and you go, and I'm not putting any of this on you, but I'm saying, how does Kenful go from the funds are available, let's build what we need to build, and not just go, you know what, we're gonna put up more $2,000 apartments.
Yeah.
Not that they're not nice, but right now, they're not needed.
They're a little pricey right now. I think it's a really valid question. I think as a council and as voted in members of community, you could relay these concerns as well to the province. And one thing I will add is I think there's a role, and I'm trying to better understand this for myself. So through CMHC and the beast that they are, and through the federal allocations of funds, but as well as their own business side as the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, what I'm learning more about is programs for developers on how to set off costs for certain types of developments, particularly affordable housing developments. So right now, part of what I'm doing is try to better understand those programs and how do we streamline it, because CMHC asks a lot of applicants. So what can we do as a municipality if we do have this need for particular types of housing to streamline that or make it easy for the developers in our community to be able to access those dollars? I was speaking to a developer in St. John who was at the conference last week who has been using those funds and speaking about their experience with it. So I've taken their contact to better understand what it looks like on the ground. Does it save you dollars? What does it look like as a developer?
And unfortunately, talking to someone in St. John,
It's different.
it's different.
It's very
because
different.
Right now, the government is saying, you're capped, right? So where rent's gonna start when you're capping me? And this was supposed to be over last February. So, you know, if I was a landlord building a new building, I'm starting here because I don't know when the government's gonna say. And the problem with that, and I'm ranting again, but the problem with that is I understand why they're doing it. There was a few landlords in different places that were going, we're gonna take advantage of this. If that was Walmart selling toilet paper for twice what it was worth during COVID, the government would have stepped in and said, you do it again, you're getting fined. But instead, they put this blanket over landlords and say, everybody's being accused of acting the same way, so we're putting restrictions. And I mean, these are businesses, and I've never seen a government in a democracy that says, we're gonna put all these restrictions on you, and it hurts the little people. It doesn't hurt the people with 10,000 units that can easily sort of float by. Their profits won't be as high, but it hurts the guy with 10 units, or the guy with 30 units, or the guy with 50 units, with the price of oil and the price of insurance and everything else. And that's why I say, maybe this council, you want to talk about writing letters to politicians, maybe every municipality in Nova Scotia should write to John Lohr or the Premier and say, you've got to do something to fix this problem, because it is a problem. But what they're doing is not going to fix the problem. Throwing money at a problem by capping it isn't going to work. Thank you.
And so what I think my takeaway within that as staff is to really keep working with our developers and understanding the particular issues that they face within Kentville development, and trying to see opportunities of where we can leverage that or find different funding, or where maybe perhaps it does come back to council to use a collective voice to ask for certain things. But that's my takeaway. Hopefully that captures the thought there. Yeah, thanks for that.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just have a couple of comments. So I think with the accessory dwelling units, I think the communication piece around that will be key. I know I've had a number of residents reach out to me around, wanting to build a unit like that on their property and what that looks like. And so usually what I do is I will point them in the direction of Kirsten. But I think the more information that we can get out to people, the better. I like to hear that you're looking at the CMHC programs. I mean, that the MLI Select program that we have, or that the CMHC has, which is federal money, like there's a piece of it where, they can go up to 50 years, they can do 90% financing, they can do it all energy efficiency, or they can do 30% affordable. So the more developers that have access to that information, and CMHC is known for not getting that information out very well, right? Like they just aren't. So I think the fact that you're in this role and you're promoting, some of those programs to our local developers will be a huge help for them for sure. So, yeah, thank you.
One thing I'll add to that, Kate, is that in talking to CMHC, they noticed the energy, particularly in Nova Scotia. So when we were applying for Housing Accelerator Fund, they would have us meet bi-weekly. On the bi-weekly calls for Nova Scotia, there was only 3 municipal staff. All the others were hired consultants to write the application. So out of those 3 municipal staff, we kept meeting after the application has closed, because there's value in what are you learning, how does that apply here, especially in the Nova Scotia context of folks who are experiencing it. And because of that, CMHC has now committed to hosting a Atlantic community of practice. They're not doing it for anywhere else in Canada because there was such a high level of energy for us to keep having these touch points on these issues that are coming up for us, and also an opportunity to create a collective voice. So if the Atlantic provinces are feeling something quite heavily, then CMHC is creating this opportunity to us to kind of collectively say something and bring it upwards. So that's starting in December, and it was really because of the folks in Nova Scotia. So kudos, shout out to Mi'kmaq, Nova Scotia.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Councillor Huntley.
Thank you. Hi, Alicia.
Hi.
If you have any conversation with CMHC, if you could, I guess, ask them a couple of things.
Sure.
Is there a way, well, one of the things that, and they even said it in one of the meetings we were at, is that payout, if you're lucky enough to get money from CMHC, it's 12 to 18 months out. A lot of times people will read, oh, I have an opportunity to do this, but there's so much criteria in what they're looking for, even for contractors, because there's a lot in there to help them. They go, yeah, too much to do, and there's too much time wait. I won't do anything with it. So the $173 billion that they have sits there in the pool, and there's a way that they need to improve that whole handout of money that they're doing. Not sure if you ever get questions on it, but that's one of the issues for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something we can pass along, and I hope in my work in trying to better understand it when a developer does hit that point, maybe there is a role we can play in supporting them and actually writing the applications. It might be an avenue that we explore.
Thank you.
All right, Alicia, thank you very much. And staff reports have been presented and are now part of the record of this meeting. And staff, I want to thank you very much for your reports and your attendance tonight.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
And before we move on to our business, we have been here almost 3 hours. So if there's no opposition, perhaps a biological break before we move on. All righty. All right, we'll get started with our business arising from the minutes from our presentations and with some old business. So the first matter that we have before us is with regards to the renaming of Cornwallis Street. And the recommendation to CAC is to recommend approval by policy the renaming of Cornwallis Street to Bridge Street. And the motion would read that CAC recommend to the November 27, 2023 council meeting approval by policy that Cornwallis Street, being a street located in the town of Kentville, shown on Schedule A, be renamed Bridge Street to be effective on the 8th day of January 2024. Councillor York, thank you for the motion. Second. Councillor Maxwell, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that CAC recommend to the November 27th, 2023 council meeting approval by policy that Cornwallis Street, being a street located in the town of Kentville and shown on Schedule A, be renamed Bridge Street to be effective on the 8th day of January 2024. Is there any discussion on this matter? Councillor Gerard.
Did we decide whether the town is paying to have people's addresses, businesses' addresses and advertising? Because I have a real problem with us making a decision that's gonna cost a business, and there's quite a few businesses on that street, money to have these changes made.
Through the chair, I believe, and someone can jog my memory here, but there was no conclusion on that question, but it was brought up by another member of council, I believe, that the cost, whatever that would be, is not comparable to the cost of the harm that name has been causing people. I think is, if I remember the conversation correctly.
Councillor Gerard, before you go on, we do have an answer.
Okay.
Do you have an answer?
I do.
Yes.
You're asking the wrong person.
So I have been working with the Names List Committee and also with the development officer, who's been doing the behind-the-scenes civic renumbering and public engagement and reaching out to folks who live on that street to find out what the issues were and if that would be a major issue. And she found that there's very few, maybe there's one that actually has Cornwallis Street on their sign for their business. That would be a major cost consideration, but very few, and that most people, it's just a little bit of a cost for letterhead. We're not buying 20 pounds of letterhead and business cards anymore. We create them on demand, so it's a very, very low cost is what we're finding.
Yeah, but there are some businesses on that street that I know of that pay for advertising and stuff like that, and I don't, not that I don't want to support this, but unless Kentville has a policy that when we make decisions in this room that affect people and are gonna cost even a little bit of money, I don't agree with that. I think people should be able to submit bills and say, this is what it cost me to get my, this changed in Yellow Pages or, on a sign or whatever. I will not be supporting this, not because I don't agree with it, but I won't be supporting it because the town needs to have a policy that when we do things that affect economic matters for businesses in town, that we should be the ones responsible to pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, is there any further discussion on this matter? Are you ready for the question? The question is that CAC recommend to the November 27th, 2023 council meeting approval by policy that Cornwallis Street, being a street located in the town of Kentville and shown on Schedule A, be renamed Bridge Street to be effective on the 8th day of January 2024. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried. Thank you very much. All right, our next matter coming before us is with regards to the basic income guarantee. And you will recall that the request is for writing letters. So the Atlantic Mayors Congress, of which Kentville is not affiliated, however, Town of Wolfville is, met in Charlottetown at the end of July, I believe. And what they were recommending at that time was to pass resolutions supporting basic income. And they were calling it the PEI project, so lobbying the federal government, as you heard. And then as well to sign the Basic Income Now Atlantic Canada consensus statement. And groups and individuals can sign that, not just towns. Now, unfortunately, I didn't have as much data as our presenters did. So the only municipalities that I could Google were HRM, the Town of Wolfville, Pictou County, and Annapolis County have already thrown their support behind this. So if I could put a motion on the floor that CAC recommend to the November 27th, 2023 council meeting support of the basic income guarantee, if someone would move that. Deputy Mayor, thank you. And for the second, Councillor York, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that CAC recommend to the November 27th, 2023 council meeting support of the basic income guarantee. Floor now open for discussion. No discussion. Are you ready for the question? The question is that CAC recommend to the November 27th, 2023 council meeting support of basic income guarantee. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Thank you very much. All right, we move on now to our new business, and the first matter under new business is our 2023 council dates. And CAC recommends approval of the proposed schedule to council. And the second CAC meeting may be held on the third Monday from January until May from 4 to 6 p.m. as a working meeting where only governance, policy, financial budget matters would be discussed. The meeting would not be held if there is no business, so that's the only caveat in this. Otherwise, the motion would be that CAC recommend approval of the proposed schedule to council at the November 27th, 2023 council meeting. Someone could move that, please? So moved. Deputy Mayor, thank you. Councillor York for the second, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that CAC recommend approval to the proposed schedule to council at the November 27, 2023 council meeting. Is there any discussion on this matter? Of note, the only date that may change would be the council meeting schedule for October 28th. As the election is on October 19th, if there was a request for a recount, there has to be 14 days, so that meeting could change, but there would be plenty of time to know whether or not that was going to occur or not. I'm lost here. So are you ready for the question? The question is that CAC recommends approval of the proposed schedule to council at the November 27, 2023 council meeting. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. The next motions, the next part, I will hand over to CAO, please.
Thank you, Mayor Snow. So the first one is around the appointment of the returning officer and the assistant returning officer. So for every municipal election in Nova Scotia, council must make a number of decisions early in the year to set the motion activities in support of fair and transparent municipal election. The returning officer is responsible for the delivery and control of municipal elections within the electoral district to which they are appointed. Kentville Town Council must appoint a returning officer for the 2024 municipal election, and we're adding to that assistant returning officer. So staff recommend that council appoint Mr. Al Kinsbury as the returning officer for the town of Kentville and Jeanette Stapleton as the assistant returning officer for the 2024 municipal election.
Thank you, CAO. And if we take that recommendation, turning it into a motion, that CAC recommend appointment of Al Kingsbury as returning officer and further Jean Stapleton as assistant returning officer for the 2024 municipal elections to council at the November 27, 2023 council meeting. If someone could move that, please. Councillor Huntley, thank you. Deputy Mayor, did I see your hand for the second? Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that CAC recommend appointment of Al Kingsbury as the returning officer and further Jeanette Stapleton as the assistant returning officer for the 2024 municipal elections to council at the November 27, 2023 council meeting. Is there any discussion on this matter? Councillor Gerard.
I'm just curious why we added an assistant. The last two elections, I believe it was only Mr. Kingsbury doing it.
He's always had an assistant. It's just that we never
We've never made it
we never
formal.
named them. No.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there any further discussion on the matter? Are you ready for the question? The question is that CAC recommend appointment of Al Kingsbury as the returning officer and further Jeanette Stapleton as the assistant returning officer for the 2024 municipal elections to council at the November 27, 2023 council meeting. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Thank you very much.
So next we're moving into item 8, BB mode of voting for 2024. The returning officer must prepare for the election, which is set to have ballots that are either all paper, all online, or a hybrid of paper and online ballots. There is research that supports online voting, suggesting that election results occur more quickly, voter attendance is increased and is more cost effective. However, online voting can also be subject to errors and hacking. Council should consider using a secure online voting platform or a hybrid of online and paper voting. Staff ask that council review the options presented in the town's CH 104 alternative voting bylaw and choose either that council establish full online voting ballots for the 2024 municipal election, or that council establish online and paper voting ballots for the 2024 municipal election.
Thank you, CAO, and council. What I will do is go around and poll you. So the question will be online only or online and paper, and then whichever one we have the most of is the motion that we will make. Councillor Gerard, online only or online and paper?
Online and paper.
Councillor Huntley?
Online and paper.
Councillor Zabian?
Online and paper.
Councillor Maxwell?
Same, online and paper.
Deputy Mayor? That's not one of my answers, but I'm going with it. Councillor York?
Online and paper.
Well, I guess majority rules, online and paper. All right. So the motion is that CAC recommend to council at the November 27, 2023 council meeting that council establish online and paper voting ballots for the 2024 municipal election. Councillor Maxwell, thank you for the second. Councillor Huntley, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that CAC recommend to council at the November 27, 2023 council meeting that council establish online and paper voting ballots for the 2024 municipal election. Is there any discussion on this matter? I don't think we had any Russian interference the last time, and I believe you have costs, some numbers for us, CAO, just...
Jen's trying to push it. Sorry. Yeah, so I did get Jen to look this up. E-voting last time in the 2020 municipal election cost us $5,700 for a total of $33,000. We had a budget of $40,000. The actual was $33,000.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. I think in previous elections, if I'm correct, I think it's IntelliVote? Televote? So they did like sort of an information session, and they'll presumably do that again? Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Do we know how many paper ballots were used in the last election? Just out of curiosity, it doesn't change my vote by any stretch. And presumably, if there was a rush on day of and paper ballots ran out, you could vote online with assistance from Mr. Kingsbury or Ms. Stapleton?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have some of these
Oh,
numbers
please.
here. It's miraculous what I have in front of me. 7% of voters cast ballot by phone. 11% of voters used paper ballots.
So we could figure out pretty accurately how many ballots would be needed, so we
Right.
wouldn't overspend on paper?
Right.
Got it.
So the other thing as well to remember is that was 2020.
Yeah.
At the height of, well, not the height of COVID, but, you know, it was our
COVID, certainly.
second, our second sentence, I guess. Remember, they let us out in
Lockdown.
July,
Yeah.
and then locked us down again?
Yeah.
So I think it was in our second lockdown. Yeah, sorry, sentence.
Thank you.
Okay, are you ready for the question? The question is that CAC recommend to council at the November 27, 2023 council meeting that council establish online and paper voting ballots for the 2024 municipal election. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Thank you.
Okay, we moved on to 8.B.C of the voters list. Part of the election process also includes the recommendation that the permanent list of registered electors established and maintained by Elections Nova Scotia be used as the preliminary list of elections for municipal units. A deadline for developing a final list of electors should be prepared by summer of 2024. The returning officer must request permission from the town to obtain and update the list of electors from Elections Nova Scotia. Staff recommend that council permit the returning officer to obtain and update the list of electors from Elections Nova Scotia, and that the permanent register of electors established and maintained by Elections Nova Scotia be used as the basis for the preliminary list of electors for the town of Kentfall in the October 19th, that is a misprint there, 2024 municipal election.
Thank you, CAO, and our motion is that CAC recommend to council that council permit the returning officer to obtain and update the list of electors from Elections Nova Scotia, and further, that the permanent register of electors established and maintained by Elections Nova Scotia be used as the preliminary list of electors for the town of Kentville in the October 19th, 2024 municipal election at the November 27th, 2023 council meeting. Someone could move that, please? Deputy Mayor, thank you. Councillor Huntley, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that CAC recommend to council that council permit the returning officer to obtain and update the list of electors from Elections Nova Scotia, and further, that the permanent register of electors established and maintained by Elections Nova Scotia be used as the preliminary list of electors for the town of Kentville in the October 19th, 2024 municipal election at the November 27th, 2023 council meeting. Is there any discussion on this matter? There being no discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is that CAC recommend to council that council permit the returning officer to obtain and update the list of electors from Elections Nova Scotia, and further, that the permanent register of electors established and maintained by Elections Nova Scotia be used as the preliminary list of electors for the town of Kentville in the October 19th, 2024 municipal election at the November 27, 2023 council meeting. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and that motion is carried. Thank you.
And the last one under new business is 8.B.D, and that is advanced poll date. This is crazy. An advanced poll date should be determined and should be consistent with neighboring municipal units to avoid confusion among electors. Staff recommend that council hold advanced polls on October 10th, 2024.
Thank you, CAO. And the motion is that CAC recommend to council that council hold advance polls on October 10th, 2024 for the 2024 municipal election at the November 23rd, 2023 council meeting. Someone could move that, please. Councillor Maxwell, thank you. Councillor York for the second. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that CAC recommend to council that council hold advance polls on October 10th, 2024 for the 2024 municipal election at the November 27th, 2023 council meeting. Is there any discussion on this matter? There being no discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is that CAC recommend to council that council hold advance polls on October 10th, 2024 for the 2024 municipal elections at the November 27th, 2023 council meeting. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. We're now ready for an election. All right, public comment. Members of the public are invited to speak to council on any agenda item. You will be provided with 3 minutes to speak. Please provide your name and address prior to speaking.
Good evening. My name is Sharon Kehoe, and I live at 29 Alicia Boulevard. I have 3 things to bring up tonight. First one is the Director of Finance didn't seem to know what the budget was for legal for 2023-24. It's $120,000. If you've spent 90% of it already and you have 4.5 months left to go, that it works out to about $109,000 if my quick math is right. And given the newspapers and obviously you're going to need a lot more money. So that's number one. The second one is we had visitors tonight that knew we were going to council and wanted to bring up some concerns they had. They almost got into an accident and, regarding Webster Street and the bike lane. Wondering if, in fact, that's going to remain. It's now 1 lane as opposed to the 2 lanes that it has been. It's winter season. We have hockey. It's dark at night. And there's a straight line that takes you right to the intersection between River and Webster. There is a stop sign on River. But when traffic goes down there, what happens is you're coming out of the rink or wherever and you're in the 1 lane and you've got a solid line, these people here are stopped all right, but then they move forward because it's a different lane, except these people here, because they're in a rush, are crossing over and you have the potential of an accident. Given that in hockey, when it's so much more busier, I'm just throwing it out there that you might want to consider taking a look at if there are any other alternatives in order to address that problem, so that we don't have an accident. And then the third thing that I wanted to bring up, actually it's only directed solely at Councillor Sabian. It's nothing. After the last CAC meeting, there was a lot of concern brought up, and I had some conversations with some councillors that I really thought there was a genuine concern and that there was an opportunity to make things better. And I really thought that that was important that that happened. And at the same time, I saw a posting that you had that, I knew that you were concerned, at least that's what the message was. And I tried to get ahead of that. I initiated a conversation with you to try to talk you out of any type of action that you would be justified in taking that you didn't take. And I urged, and I I think Mary jumped in there to help, and I want to apologize to you because I truly owe you an apology. Thank you very much.
Thanks for apologizing.
All right, thank you. The Council Advisory Committee has one item concerning legal, which must be conducted in a closed session, and we require a motion to go into the closed session to discuss the agenda item. And the motion is to move into a closed session to discuss the agenda item. Thank you. And a seconder? Jillian, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council move into the closed session. The question is on adoption of the motion to move into a closed session. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you, and the time is 9:16.